Yo, how's it going, folks? Welcome to episode 159 of the Simpa Life Podcast. I hope you're keeping well. Hope you've had a wonderful week since I saw you last week with the boys from Mendo. My condolences and my thoughts go out to everyone that I know in California. The fires are still raging in some areas. It is calming down a bit, but the devastation that's been left behind is monumental. I was going to say, luckily, it's sort of in the south rather than the north, and I don't mean that in the sense of like fuck LA, that's what I'm saying, but like the north of California has some incredible legacy and connection to the cannabis culture and to the legacy culture, and I'm just glad to see that some of those what is left of the scene up there is still, touch wood, fingers crossed, doing all right now. But yeah, we're going to jump into today's guest because we've just been preambling there for a good 20 minutes because there is so much to cover. We've got a little bit of news as well that I'm going to weave into the podcast recording. Hopefully this will go quite well. There's something that I did absent-mindedly forget last week, and because it's been a good few months since we last recorded, I wanted to take the time right now, because I think he obviously relates to today's guest as well, to send my condolences to the family of Winston Matthews, who recently passed, unfortunately. Did some incredible work in the scene. I was lucky enough to do an interview with him and Alan Booth, which I think we have in the live section somewhere on the YouTube. I will share that again so that people can see it as well. But yeah, without further ado, let's jump over to introducing today's guests, who are a UK-based married couple from Cumbria, who for the past 3 decades have been fighting against the UK's antiquated and immoral prohibition of cannabis. Collectively, they've been prosecuted 5 times on charges of supplying cannabis to other MS patients in the UK. The cannabis-infused chocolate, to MS patients in the UK. Over the years, they've given away over £500,000 worth of infused chocolates, and they've directly helped thousands of people. They are Mark and Lezley Gibson. How are you doing, guys?
Hello.
Hi, Simpa.
Good to have yous on. My handwriting is atrocious. That's why I was stumbling through that. I was scribbling these this morning. As I said to you in the preamble, there is so much of your story in the mainstream. There is so many news stories, so many different articles. Obviously, the CC guide thing you sent me earlier, I'll include links below, guys, which is an archive of basically all the news stories since like the early 90s of cases that these guys have been involved with, so do check that out. For people that maybe don't know yourselves or your story, let's try and do this sort of in a chronology, I guess. So I guess your story ultimately kind of starts with you two meeting in sort of the 80s and yourself receiving an MS diagnosis, Lezley. So could you tell us about receiving your diagnosis and you two sort of meeting and getting collectively involved in cannabis?
Okay. I was about 19, 20 when I showed my first symptoms of MS. I had pins and needles down my left side, which graduated into paralysis and loss of sight and loss of speech. I was diagnosed at the age of 21. The specialist told me within 5 years I would more than likely be in a wheelchair and incontinent, which at the age of 21 wasn't really an option for me. It just sounded awful. So I went away with very little help. The only thing they did say was don't eat butter, eat flour and margarine, which I found a little bit, quite a lot unhelpful, to be fair. I realised pretty quickly that I was basically on my own and there wasn't really much help. That was about 84, and then a couple of years later I met Mark. We became a couple. He was already a smoker, and I noticed when I was with Mark and his friends and we were smoking, my MS was good, for want of a better word. Eventually I kind of looked into it a bit more. I couldn't find much information. I've got multiple sclerosis. It's important to look after myself, so I wasn't going to do anything that might make me ill. So I checked it all out. The only reference I could find to cannabis and multiple sclerosis was in a magazine called The Hooker, which was like a very old magazine.
Legalised cannabis campaign magazine, probably from the early 80s. So I'm guessing Russell Cronin probably was involved with that at some point, way before any campaigning that we did. 89 was the first sort of major brush with the law when we both found ourselves in Carlisle Crown Court for an amount of Moroccan cannabis.
It was quite good because, as I say, I found this reference in The Hooker, and that made me take it seriously. and decided that I'm going to use this as a medicine as opposed to just...
There was a connect. Yeah, it was the first sign of any connection of using cannabis as a medication at all. And, in 89, Lezley, we both found ourselves in the dock at Carlisle Crown Court. And part of, not Leslie's defence, but mitigation, we had no choice but to plead guilty to that. Mitigation was that it helped with her MS. And the judge, my recollection was he was really old. I mean, we were just kids then. But he was really old, this guy. And he looked like he was ill, Parkinson-y type. And he pulled himself forward on his chair. And when Lezley said that she was using cannabis for her MS, he said, well, we can't blame her for that, and sort of slumped back in his chair and gave us a conditional discharge, which, for the amount of cannabis at the time, it was the largest recorded seizure in Cumbria, north of England at that time. And it was, I think it was 6 or 7 pounds of various Moroccans. And, unfortunately, we were in possession with it and we found ourselves charged with it. Thankfully, we didn't go to jail for that.
But yeah, it was, for me, with the health side of it, it was like a miracle. All of a sudden, my eyes didn't hurt so much, my arms didn't shake as much, my legs weren't as wobbly, I didn't need to wee all the time, the pains that I was getting were a lot easier to cope with. And if I did have an attack with the MS, it got better. I wasn't left with... excuse me, I wasn't left with any disability. Well, that's not strictly true, but not like the extent that they were telling me I would be. And I have my moments where I'm really not well at all, but mostly because, from my point of view, because of my use of cannabis, I have a quality of life that I wasn't supposed to have. And I've never used any doctor drugs. Originally, they put me full of steroids, which was really awful. I went really fat. And I was trying to learn to walk again, which was even harder because I was so fat, and it didn't help anything. And anything the doctors offered me had this little, well, it could make you worse. And I really didn't want to be any worse. It was all bad enough as far as I was concerned. But the cannabis it gave me hope. It gave me everything with MS is negative. You're going to have this happen, you're going to have that happen, and it's just awful. And the people you talk to are all quite negative. So the joy of finding something that made me feel normal was really nice, really, really nice. And I wasn't going to give that up for anything. I'd fight tooth and nail for that. Someone tried to take anybody's medicine off them, they would fight tooth and nail for it. My only crime ever is to want to be well. I never wanted to be a criminal. I never even had detention at school. I never done anything in my life. And to find myself locked in a police station for hours and hours, dragged in and out of Crown Courts, locked in cells, escorted by an armed guard, and I can't even bloody run. I am a disabled woman. I'm supposed to be looked after, not tortured and persecuted and have police through my house, dragging my place to pieces.
Taken out of the Crown Court dock to be strip searched in the back room because you've got cannabis on you in the dock while you're being prosecuted for cannabis.
I had a Sativex spray and somebody reported it to the judge. She's taken cannabis in the dock. The next thing I knew, I was taken into a room, strip searched in my bags, and it was just awful and so necessary. The amount of money and just resources that they use to torture my life is completely unnecessary.
My kitten's trying to break into my studio there. It's like it's an insanity to think. Like you're saying about the size of the seizure of the first prosecution that landed you yourselves in court, of like
fairly huge.
They were doing people for what now would be less than a joint's worth and putting them behind bars physically.
Well, the actual evidence that got us into the dock was one roach in the fireplace. We just unfortunately happened to have, that's what was located in our place. One roach in a fireplace that hadn't been burnt because we'd missed the fireplace.
So there's young people.
We were fairly careful. Just unfortunately, we were connected to a rather large amount elsewhere.
I mean, I'm 20 years younger than you guys, so thereabouts. Can't do the math in my head. Yeah, about 20 odd. There's kids now, so like 20-year-olds, that have got access to vapes and dabs and the world that they will not be able to quantify their ability to understand that you guys went to court for a roach.
It was smaller than that.
Yeah.
I mean, it just was smaller than that. But ultimately, the first Crown Court trial in 1989 was over a roach.
Well, in them days, you could get done for admitting to smoking weed in a picture. I can remember having friends that had been taken to court for saying, yes, that's me having a spliff in that picture. It's a joke. Admission
of guilt.
They
were desperate.
Wow. Yeah, man. It's okay. So that's late 80s, early 90s. Obviously, some things started to change. We started to introduce like the concept of hemp licensing, and industrial applications of cannabis started to come along. Obviously, yourself, as you said, as we can see by your life, that yes, you very adamantly stood up for what you believed in favor of your medicine. So then going into sort of the 90s, and after this first experience with the system, how did that sort of motivate your actions moving forward? Sort of what came next in the events?
It was just steady. After that court case, it was heads down.
Yeah, I just didn't understand how I could be in so much trouble for wanting to be well. If it had been paint stripper that had made me misbehave, I would have taken that. Thank God it wasn't. But I mean, that's my only crime is to want to be well. And I don't understand how, because you chose your medicine rather than the doctor making you have it, you're going to get into trouble all the time. I mean, I've been in and out of courts and jail cells for the last 30 years. I'm ill. I'm not a criminal. I've never been a criminal.
We went into the 90s sort of heads down and just continuing as you do under the radar. Don't upset them. Don't end up back in court. I think I got another possession charge in that time at some point for half an ounce of Moroccan or something. I think I actually said it in the magistrates at that time. Well, this time we're not going to apologise. It's just something I'm doing. And I got a fine and thrown out. And we got mid-90s, I'm guessing, and how Howard Marks was released from prison in America, came back over and stood for legalised cannabis, and the Rosie Boycott campaign in the Guardian. And Leslie found herself, I think probably the year before that, on the Kilroy show. And that was me. I had a nice middle management job at the time, and that kind of made my position kind of untenable. The pothead manager just wasn't going down well. And we moved out into the country and got active, if you like, and started reading stories in the papers, and his eyeball pops up. This woman with MS in Orkney who was making small amounts of cannabis chocolate for the islanders in her kitchen. And this really kind of inspired me. There was this woman who had MS, and obviously in a worse state than myself or Leslie with her MS, and she was getting it together and making these chocolates and making a bit of a wave for herself. And the stories were coming out that this was getting sent out by the post, and nobody's really managed. Anyway, she got really quite ill, and she was no longer mobile. And
they tortured her with coppers in and out of her house and taking her back and forward to court as well. That's what killed Grace, the last court case. They dragged her off her... I mean, she was bedridden. They dragged her into...
They flew her off the island and took her to a court elsewhere. And myself and a few others, Clara...
Heartbreaking.
Went up there to see Biz, and literally it was really quite sad.
There's no way to treat a disabled woman. She was absolutely...
And again, she was admonished. They stopped the trial in the end. But she inspired us to take on the chocolate thing, and Leslie had already set up a group after the Kilroy Silk.
With Claire Hodges, Liz Bright, I'm sure you heard of her.
She, Alliance for Cannabis Therapeutics. And she was a campaigner promoting cannabis as a medicine. She was probably the link, well, she was the link to GW. She was the patient's advocate, I think.
She was the sensible side.
She was the legal side, if you like, and THC for MS, or THC as it was back then with Leslie's group, was what became THC for MS, became the proactive group that actively supplied MS sufferers. with cannabis chocolate.
Yeah, worked very closely with Liz for a long, long time.
So Liz Bright, Claire Hodges, aka Claire Hodges. Leslie and Biz were like three women who were all MS sufferers, who were rather naughty between the three of them, if you like. And it inspired me to produce the chocolate in Alston, Cumbria. We got involved with news articles and it kind of snowballed or mushroomed. Kind of out of control, but within control. And, you know, we did that for, I don't know, 6 years or something.
Originally, after being on Kilroy, I found Colin Davis and Claire and the guy...
Free Rob Cannabis, of course.
Free Rob Cannabis. Tony's Hemp Corner down in London. And these were the only people at the time that were really doing anything hands-on. You know, as I didn't know anything about cannabis, and as ill people really don't have a clue. And people like Colin and Bays and Tony and Free Rob, they were godsend.
And we've got to remember, there wasn't an internet as such then. You know, if we were talking to each other online, I think we went online around late 90s. We were talking probably mostly on email servers, you know, and then slowly the forums came up, notably UK 420, where we were extremely active. You know,
they were really supportive as well, really supportive.
If we were going to do a free MediWeed service, you needed to be talking to people who were producing the product. And we found a group of people who were very happy to be growing, and they found that they didn't want to be selling the product, they just wanted to be self-sufficient, and they were donating what was left over of their crops to ourselves and groups like ourselves, and, you know, later.
If we knew anybody that was growing, we would approach them to donate to the chocolate, and that was how we managed to be able to do it for free.
And there would be companies that would be giving us seeds. So notably, I think we got an awful lot of seeds from, say, who we got them from. It was Weed World magazine when we wrote for them. You know, we'd get 1,000 seeds, Skunk number 1, and give them away. And give them to growers.
Funds, wasn't it? Just to raise funds.
Growers would grow them and go, hey, we've got this, and it'd send us that so much back. And it was, you know,
a really nice little hippie kind of.
There was no money to get the money to get the money out of it. It was really, really sweet. And people give us things to make the products. Leslie mentioned Tony from Tony's Hemp Corner. He decided we should be organic. And I was telling Tony, God, why we can't afford to be organic, you know. It's green and black's chocolate or whatever, and you use that. It's over, you know, way back then, it was something like £1.50 a bar or something. And they kindly donated us the chocolate for, I think, a good couple of years. He would send the Zuma driver up, and we'd open our door, and in would come all this chocolate. I mean, hundreds of pounds worth donated, if not thousands. And, you know, we just have I think 6 kilos of the stuff melted at any given time.
Always a pot on the stove. Because the longer you infuse the chocolate with the cannabis, the better it worked, basically. So that pot would be 24/7.
Yeah,
and
we
just
had
constantly.
No real science back then.
We didn't know what. No, we hadn't a clue. Really.
Taking cannabis and mixing it with chocolate and moulding it.
We just knew it worked.
And sending it out.
It worked. I was a hairdresser. I've got no medical or any kind of background in chemistry or anything. I just knew that this was a little miracle. This stopped me needing to go to the toilet all the time. It stopped me shaking. It stopped me trembling. It stopped me twitching. It stopped me having so much pain. It was just marvellous, absolutely wonderful thing. And I wanted everybody else with MS to know about it. I mean, I should have probably gone away and sat in the corner quietly and not let on, but I really couldn't. And once you tell somebody, they tell somebody, then they tell somebody.
And then you get a letter, and then you get something through your door that says to the woman with MS in Alston,
it was quite
and Alston, Cumbria, and then please help me. We get people turning up at the door. We had a gift shop at the time, and we'd have people just literally turning up in the gift shop asking for help. And you just didn't say no. You couldn't say no. I got out of my wheelchair. I'd never been out of bed for so long, and I made some curtains and hung the curtains.
Little miracle stories every time.
While they might sound like anecdotes, we've got written evidence. We've got the letters still. Piles after piles. I think
all our court evidence. I mean, at one point we had doctors sending prescriptions for their patients to have our chocolate. We had MS nurses all over the country telling their patients to get in touch with us and use our chocolate. Yet when it came to court, them MS nurses denied all knowledge of us. And the judge wouldn't allow us to use any of the doctor's prescriptions. He wouldn't allow us to use anything as evidence.
The biggest bugbear of the cannabis chocolate trial, if you like, was the fact that we were stated that there was no use of the medicinal necessity defence any longer, and that cannabis had no medicinal value. Well, those are patently untrue now, and provably untrue. Yet our conviction stands on the basis of
I would like an apology.
Of information that was given at the point of that trial that was wrong, and that should be, in my opinion, corrected.
They based their prosecution on untruths, complete lies. To turn around and say cannabis had no medicinal value was an absolute lie, and they shouldn't be allowed.
And not allow you to bring any of the people who used the product as witnesses.
We couldn't bring any doctors in, we couldn't bring any nurses in, we couldn't bring any of the people that had received the chocolate in. They were really mean to us.
It was unfair. So what we ultimately did was I got a sack barrow, and we piled up the lever arch files onto the sack barrow, so it was full. We're talking 1.2 meters. 4 feet of files, maybe more. And the top one, we put the most poignant people that we dealt with during that time with, because we didn't store anything electronically, basically each person who got in touch with us would have their introductory letter, a letter off a doctor stating they had MS, and then we just make a sheet, and basically every time they sent us please could you send me some chocolate, we would stamp the sheet and say bar sent on whatever, and that was recorded, and we stored those in a heap in the files, and that's what wheeled into court. So when the jury were wheeled in and the judge came in, there was this sack barrow with an awful lot of information on it that
we weren't allowed to use.
And I was in the dock, and I just pointed at it and told the jury that's what they weren't allowed to see. And the jury were dismissed immediately because I'd said something I shouldn't have said. And the jury were out, and then the judge ordered them to be opened, and they selected X number that were then having to be shown to the jury because
we made an issue with it.
We'd made an issue of it, and they knew there was something that they weren't being told. Bear in mind, this was I think it was the week before Christmas, and the jury didn't want to be at the trial.
No, but I heard one woman say, I'd rather be out doing my Christmas shopping than in here. I heard her say
so we had a problem with a jury that were preoccupied with wanting to do something else in the worst months of the year, in a city that they didn't live in. So the jury, Cumbria is a very big county, so most of the jury, to avoid them knowing us, they brought a lot of the jury out from West Cumbria. So they're having to have a train at early o'clock to come to a court they didn't want to be at, but they wanted to be Christmas shopping. And the most crazy, annoying thing, because everybody was getting on with us, the ushers were getting on with us, security were getting on with us, and the jury was sent out, and the jury were back. I'm going to be conservative with my estimate here, just because of the passage of time since that court case. The jury were back within 20 minutes.
Actually, loads less than that. It was taking them 5 minutes to get to the room.
So we worked it out. we did the metrics of it, and then the jury would take 4 minutes to get to the jury room with the usher, a couple of minutes for the usher to go through all the bullshit that they tell them that they have to go through on the evidence. Then we sit down, find their elected foreman of the jury, find them guilty or not guilty, then get back to the court. We're talking, their discussion went down into less than a minute, 5 minutes. We were found guilty.
The judge told them to find us guilty.
Yeah.
Look, when he did his summing up at the end, he said, you might feel sympathy for Mr. and Mrs. Gibson, you might feel empathy, and you might feel, but they have broken the law. And that is the
whilst not directed.
He said that.
Yes, I'm saying the judge isn't allowed to direct a jury, but the language used clearly directed, and the Christmas shopping was very alluring. And this was I think December the 19th or something. It was close to Christmas.
Which year? Sorry.
Oh, was it 2003? 2006?
Here?
About 2003, I think.
2003.
2003, yeah. And we were brought back. So at that time, we had to go for a probation reports, which again we weren't going to. The judge said we were altruistic. We weren't going to bend over and say we're sorry.
I didn't think we'd done anything wrong.
Sorry, we did what any reasonable human being would do, and that was help somebody else who was in distress. Mm-hmm. We just weren't allowed to defend ourselves. We went back after Christmas, so we were left hanging over Christmas with that one, and we went back for the sentencing, and we were both in prison for I think 18 months, and then suspended, which is a huge relief. I mean, this was alongside a third party, Marcus Davis, who sadly is no longer with us. He passed a year ago. Found guilty of conspiracy to supply cannabis. There was no conspiracy. We actively did it. We didn't
try to do it.
We didn't pretend we didn't do it. Yeah. We provided all evidence of where the money went, how it came, because people were donating money for stamps or giving us stamps or donating chocolate. Or
some people didn't donate anything at all. Some people would send a $5. Some people would send half a dozen stamps. It all helped. It all made the system work.
Ultimately, we got recorded documentation of 1,200 individual MS sufferers in the UK alone.
Spain and America and Italy
that we helped, which I think at the time there's 85,000 or there was 85,000 MS sufferers in the UK at that time. So we helped nearly 1% of them, or over 1%.
Yeah, we're quite proud of that.
And we'll wave a flag for that one. At the time as well, without really the means and the wherefore of the internet in its infancy to be able to do that. It was quite a thing. I mean, the Telegraph did we thought a mini interview, but the Telegraph, which transpired, I think it was the Observer, is it? That's the Telegraph on the Sunday.
I think they're both owned by the same people.
Yeah, they did a 5-page in-depth story, which really sort of put our heads above the parapet, if you like. We'd had the local news, Border News and Look Around come and do a film of us actually making the cannabis chocolate, and then we had the Observer, and as I say, it was a 5-page glossy story of this lovely couple in Alston, Cumbria, who altruistically made cannabis chocolate. And Cumbria Police had a chat with us about that, and basically invited me to go for an interview. And I thought, they're going to say, this is it, stop this behaviour right now. And we had a robust conversation where I basically said, well, the mission statement was to help MS sufferers until there was a viable alternative available on the NHS, and we'll continue to do this. And he thought, oh, that's not really the issue. The issue is going in the press and the news.
And they just wanted us to be quiet.
So basically, shut up.
Mm-hmm. We were told to shut up. Yeah.
So we took his advice and continued. And I think the cannabis coffee shop things came up in the sort of shortly after this, and it seemed like a good idea to be involved with some mates, Colin Davis, and go and work in the coffee shop in Stockport, and THC for MS.
More sponsors.
More sponsors. We worked closely, and Cumbria Police definitely didn't like that. in later intel from court case papers, they'd been following us backwards and forwards to Manchester. And eventually we got arrested in Manchester by Stockport police. And
I got locked up for ages.
You know, we all sat there and when they're asking us whose is this and whose is that, and Leslie goes, well, that's mine.
Because I didn't want them to take my medicine off us. It's my medicine.
She found herself in the cells again. And they let her go, and there was no further action on that case.
Was that when our friends were over from Holland?
Yeah. Yeah,
they thought it was a joke. They couldn't believe we were all being arrested. Thought it was.
They had a great day out in the coffee shop in England. You know,
the police station.
Our Dutch friends being arrested, or rather, their English friends being arrested, refusing to arrest the Dutch friends because Dutch people are going to be much more problematic than a British person.
During this time, I had Colin Paisley helped me make up the THC for MS, did that?
Yeah.
And he was the mayor of Carlisle for a while. He'd come up from down south. He was a heroin addict when he first arrived up here, and he made so well for himself. He ended up being the mayor. But a man with a lot of insight, and he helped me absolutely.
Certainly, I think he gave us the why and where for us to be able to get up and talk to people.
Because he knew
that normally we would just say, nah, we're not going there. We're not, go talk to.
But he stood in the elections as well. He was one of the first in Carlisle to stand. Then I stood after him, and you stood in Penrith. That was another interesting time. The elections. We were taken quite seriously, which we were surprised at as well, weren't we? Penrith more than Carlisle. Carlisle was Labour with Eric Martlew and that in here, and they were quite cliquey. They didn't really. The Lib Dems were keen to chat to us, weren't they?
Yeah, you've got to remember 97, 99, early 2000, the Lib Dems were really, really interested in the legalisation. They thought it was going to be a much bigger cookie than it was at the time. And when they looked at, I think they looked at the results of the LCA in those early elections, and saw that we were pulling 1.2 to 1.6 maybe.
So they got 4%.
I think one got 1.7. Nobody was getting their back. And it didn't really seem to be such a huge issue. And we rolled into the next election fairly quickly. I know it was around 2006-ish. And Iraq was the huge issue back then. And, when you tried to, legalisation was a big issue. When you put it into the world politics at the time, it really wasn't the big talking point. Things had sort of moved on then.
It was an interesting time.
I'm going to interject because you've covered so much time there and events, and wow, yeah. That's still only. We're still 15 years to go, and another whole bit. But yeah, I just wanted to comment on a few points there and ask a few questions. So we were talking, or we sort of alluded to about you obviously searched for your Sativex in court quite, unceremonially in a really wide to strip search you if they know you have this thing to ask. I'm sure you would have quite easily gone, this is the thing, I've got it, but you ain't fucking having it.
Yeah. They did actually take it off me and wouldn't give me it back. And when I asked them why, they said because the date was out on it and it would be dangerous.
Wow. So it perplexes me because you as an MS patient, obviously, and throughout all this time, the justification for the creation of what I now term the medical cannabis industrial complex, the creation of GW, its licensing and the creation of its first product, Sativex, was to treat MS. And so during the 90s, obviously you spoke of Claire Hodges and sort of the work.
Directly linked to Claire Hodges. Without, you can't underestimate what Claire did, without...
She was the clever side.
Without Claire, or Liz Bright, as she was really a real name, GW would not have got their license. She was instrumental in him initially getting his license to research.
So what was going on? Because I can obviously look at various documents and whatnot, but frankly, I was a child at the time. I'll have been watching WWF and shit like that. I've been climbing trees and stuff. Not quite yet. Discovering weed. A couple of years to go yet. But yeah, my point is, so at the time, as you said, she was quite instrumental in what became of GW licensing and the infrastructure. There was momentum. Obviously, I think 95, 96, around then, there was the Royal Commission that was set up, which I think was a Lib Dem that pushed that. And then
sure Leslie's got a credit in that one.
Yeah,
and then the evidence came back from that of the whole, this is a therapeutic product, we should not be prosecuting people that are using this, we should look at decriminalisation, we should look at medicalisation, medicinal access, etc. And then obviously a GW over those few years, 1998 comes along, GW is formed officially on paper. A couple more years go by, license retrospectively it would seem, and quite some dodgy behaviour went on, that they were allowed to potentially, or given discretion to cultivate cannabis for research purposes to create basically the data set that they present to the government to get their licensing. There's some interesting work being done by previous guest here folks, obviously Kevin Jones. He has uncovered quite some interesting things that are going on there. I'm trying to think as I'm talking to you here what is in the public domain now and what has been private conversation with him, so I'm trying to think what I can actually fucking mention here. But a lot of dodgy shit went down. A lot of dodgy shit seems to have gone down with GW.
Quite a lot. We were used by the medical people, I believe, quite a lot to get information. I mean, that invite to Leiden to talk at the pharmaceutical.
The IACM meeting, and we were
going just taking out information from us, weren't they?
Did a couple of lectures with the Aspen Pharmaceutical Association, the pharmaceutical uni in Aspen, is that Birmingham? And again, another one in Liverpool, and they like to, without people doing what we did illegally,
they wouldn't have had a clue.
They wouldn't have anything to talk about.
100%.
They didn't have a starting point. So without the recreational use of cannabis from whatever, without the anecdotal stories and people standing up and talking about the help that they were gaining from using cannabis illicitly, no research would have been done. These pharma corporations wouldn't be making any money. I find it bizarre, the commercialization of something that was always something that was freely shared or shared at nearest cost as possible in the people who were doing smoking and importing weed back in the 60s and 70s. It was never a huge money-making cow. It was a thing for people to help each other. And
most of the dealers were anti-capitalist, were quite rebellious in nature and anti-authoritarian, you know what I mean? So
I don't know any rich dope dealers, that's for sure.
Whereas now you look at it and it's burn as a billionaire, sorry.
And the dope dealers now are the politicians' husbands.
Yeah, they're the posh kids. They're the ones that didn't smoke weed back when it was unlawful, and they didn't get the cool thing of it. So now they're like, oh, we'll make it lawful, and I own a weed company, and look, I've got weed, and everyone's like, yeah, weed's a thing. What you acting like this for? The point I wanted to raise on the GW thing was obviously they were seizing crops, and then documents have been. Yeah, I've talked about it on the podcast, so of course it's in public domain. Documents have been released that show the Home Office worked in conjunction with GW to give various amounts of seized cannabis from people like yourselves for their data studies.
Okay.
You know, there's then obviously all the information.
I believe that.
Yeah, I've no trouble believing that.
I totally believe that. I mean, when we gave the IACM, the International Alliance of Cannabis as Medication, the talk there, I can't quite remember the Philip. I can't remember GW's number 2 shareholder. He'll come to me. I think it's Philip somebody. He stood up and asked a question, and Ethan Russo was amazed. He was there. He was absolutely amazed that he'd asked the question, and the question he asked was, "What strains do you use?" And that was the sole information that he wanted, was to know what strains we were giving you.
Because
your story of cannabis arriving from the Home Office to GW via seizures. I believe that when we ran THC for MS, we were the recipient on more than one occasion of something that was anonymously sent for appraisal.
We didn't know where it come from.
A normally large amount would arrive.
Well, this is the whole thing. I mean, again, I'm going to pull this and have this conversation because we've had it on the podcast. So therefore,
this is brand new to me. But with the story you gave me there, I know of 2 occasions where we received gifts that were large. Well, let's say gifts or donations for the chocolate that were unnaturally or unusually good and large.
Well, this is the thing. So some of the work that Kevin's found is that there were various grows on aristocracy sites, like 3rd, 4th generation lords. And there'd be like a huge cannabis grow be found in like the mansion, and they'd be like, oh, what the fuck? And there's 2 occasions that Kevin's pointed out where these were raided literally the week of flower, and they were seized and taken off, and we don't know what's going to happen to that, and they're caught up in this cycle of them being donated to GW to use as samples. And so it was, the way the narrative seems to be looking is that they couldn't have the license to hold or produce it themselves, but what they basically found was if this thing was already created, and we as the governing body, there are 3 things, there are exemptions for drugs in this country: authorization, fucking prescription, and an exemption. So if you have an exemption or a prescription or an authorization, you can then hold cannabis. If you're a cop, you take cannabis off somebody, that's still unlawful for you, but because you're a cop, you've got authorization to hold that, and then you won't charge for it. There's then like a section, a defense under the section of the Misuse of Drugs Act of like accidentally being in possession of drugs, but that just nobody seems to use that, and the courts don't seem to accept it. But generally they couldn't hold the product. But like I said, if they were then given it for research purposes, not commercialization purposes or for profiteering purposes, it was always about sort of the data acquisition. And so while that was kind of happening, like you had this movement in the House of Commons and the House of Lords having these discussions. Then, like I said, 1998 comes along, GW is formed. There's then this movement towards cannabis being rescheduled under the Labour Party under Tony Blair, and it's then taken down to a Class C from a Class B. Part of the reasoning behind this is everyone's, it's liberalisation attitudes, we're moving into a new generation. I personally believe, if I was wearing my little tinfoil hat, if I'm sat at GW and going, we need more data, expand the number of people that are consuming cannabis. We now know the population of 1% of the population is consuming cannabis. Let's then look at that instead of what they've done under skunk psychosis and that lie of the past 20 years. What I feel they were doing was expanding the number of participants in a data set study, and they were then looking and going, okay, there's now 100,000 people use it. What are people claiming when they're caught they're using it for? What are people going to their doctors and saying they use it for? What are, and they're building that live data that they can't touch otherwise. And so I think they were allowing that to happen. And then once they got the license, once they started to produce the concept and start to go to marketing Sativex as a product, the timelines, all of a sudden we go back to a Class B. All of a sudden cannabis is this dangerous goddamn drug. All of a sudden all of those coffee shops and everything that were then set up with the help of like Novak Shaik, like say Colin Davies and Chris Baldwin and those kind of people were just smashed, and were like these terrible people. And the narrative suddenly changed to going, well, cannabis is this dangerous drug, but when we the doctors with our smarmy little white suits touch it, it's magic. So we made this magic medicine, but there's all these druggies out here. And then they created like the narrative of skunk. This whole thing came from skunk number 1 being the primary...
I'm laughing at the concept of Winston Matthews and just being dangerous. It just...
literally, isn't it? It's an insanity to go. These people were just, they saw a problem and they acted on it, and then they saw that the solution every day. Like you said, a different person would come to them and go, look, fucking walking because of you. I got the best night's sleep I've had in 20 years because of you yesterday. I ate because of the... Yeah, there's so many different aspects to it. And the system then, like I said, these converging timelines of it suddenly being allowed for us all to do it and all these things to happen, and it get almost, I feel, positive media attention. So then they could have simultaneously criminal gang trafficking cannabis and making millions of pounds. And we've just discovered this new cannabinoid, it can really help children and la 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 la. And these things converged. So that now there's a schizophrenic attitude, not just in the media, but most of the general public, that will go when they smell it on the street, cannabis, druggies, teens in psychosis and schizophrenia. And then, but then the neighbour comes round, someone of your generation, sort of in their late 50s, 60s. Goes, oh, look, I've just got this new medicine. And they're like, oh, wow, that's wonderful. What is it? Oh, it's cannabis, is it? Oh, yeah, but it's not that skunk stuff. This is safe medicine produced by people that know what they're doing. It's not the criminals. And like I said, they've converged these fucking things, and the more patented products they develop, like Epidiolex, like the next generation of like cancer drugs, which is the big fucking thing. GW were bought by Jazz Pharmaceuticals, Ireland's largest, what do you call them? God, my brain's starting to fail on words here. The word for cancer, the cancer treatments in the medical setting.
Oh, I know what you mean. Oh, crikey, I can't get it either.
That word has gone from my...
Oncology.
Yeah, oncology. Yes. Yeah. And so they've got tons of patents, tons of research in drugs for treatments of cancer. GW have like 180, 190 patents of cannabinoids, not just for delivery and extraction, but also for direct treatment. Several of them are to deal with cancer. Yeah, under the Cancer Act in the UK, we're not allowed to talk about alternative therapeutics for cancer. So there's then now this conversation sort of happening in the House of Lords and quietly like, oh, we need to get rid of the Cancer Act. If you look at the Cancer Act, every single statute on it is being removed except the advertising of alternative cures to cancer, which to you and I, we know that's going to be fucking cannabis. Because cannabis causes, THC especially, causes apoptosis in cannabis, in cancer cells. They self-identify, the body recognizes and goes, oh, that's cancerous, we need to deal with that. Whereas the way cancer works is mutations in the cellular structure in your body that then metastasize, grow together, and the body goes, that's an organ, we should feed that. And it grows and it grows. And cannabis seems to help the body into homeostasis and to like constantly in review of itself go, well, that's bad, we want to get rid of that, we'll fucking work on this, and it's like a stem cell almost in that sense. It's not a panacea or like a cure-all for everything. I think as we've discovered through like Russo's work and many others about like the entourage effect, about sort of the endocannabinoid system, that this is just something exogenous we can consume that endogenously we produce, but because of our environment and the bullshit and the removal of like non-psychoactive cannabis from say our diet, from us eating it, from us consuming it in other ways, and even I'm a vegan, but people that eat meat that consumes cannabis, the cannabinoids through studies do seem to transfer, same with milk. So the loss of it under prohibition from our diets and the rise in cancer rates seem very correlatory. It's a bit conspiratorial, at least YouTube's going to say it is, with a little box down there correcting me. But yeah, the thing that really fucks me up, the more I look back at the retrospective of this and speak to people like yourselves, is to see, it's obvious to see it looking back that they were exploiting you all. That they were only ever moving in one direction. If cannabis is a medicine, it's only a medicine. It can't be this plant. We're going to make hemp. Hemp is all of the stuff that cannabis isn't a drug. And then we're going to have cannabis the drug, and that's ours. And then these potheads and those plants that they're growing at home, they're dangerous. They're unregulated plants. You know what I mean? They treat it as if the plant itself is in some way dangerous, that it's going to get up and strangle you with its roots or something.
Yeah, it's a plant. It just grows. It's not a demon or anything.
I mean, that sort of takes us straight to 2018, and when we've got...
Was that the most recent raid? And
most recent, and
oh God, I just couldn't believe they were doing it again.
It was the most bizarre experience. They sent round uniformed coppers, and they just got... It was all chill. They asked for some cannabis chocolate, and Lezley still eats, or is eating cannabis chocolate. So I gave them 2 bars out of the kitchen cupboard, which should have been the end of their little drama. And all friendly, all nice. And then they decide they're going to have a look around the house. And it's like, why do you want to have a look around the house? That seems a bit strange for cannabis chocolate. Well, I would like to look upstairs. So we go and have a look upstairs, and we've got a 3-bedroom house here, and all the way up the stairs I'm politely telling the police officer that you don't really want to be up here, and it's a 2-bedroomed house, so we'll look in this bathroom first, and then there's a bedroom here and a bedroom here, and all chill, and I'm quite humorous, or as humorous as I can be for somebody who can have no business looking into the spare bedroom and seeing what you've got in there. And his curiosity got the better of him, and he looks into the 3rd bedroom, and I have a grow in there, of course. And, I think there was 10 plants, fairly well on. And he got excited.
It's the mess they make. They make a huge mess. They rip your house to pieces. All the neighbours are looking at you. It's just a horrible experience. And nobody should have to go through that. Certainly not ill people.
This is just prior to being able to get a legal prescription. So,
Yeah.
Just so close to being able to get the first legal.
So, like you said, the thing in my head that's really screwed me up with this is, it's like, what I see it as, imagine you got pulled over for not having tax on your car. It's a licensing issue, is what cannabis is now, is a licensing issue.
Yeah,
do you have the magic piece of paper or not? No. But they then find you in your house without the magic piece of paper. They're entitled to, like you said, smash your house up. They want to break the glass, they slash the tents, they cut the cords off all of the, like thousands of pounds in some cases worth of equipment just damaged. Imagine they pulled over your car and they just started smashing it up on the side of the street. It's the glee, they joyfully revel in that expression of violence. And to, like you said, the optic of disabled. I mean, the average person they come across in some way, and even if it's not a person that is in some way using it medicinally or not, it's still just a fucking person. You turn up in a gang of people that if you touch them, they'll smash your face in. That you can't say anything, do anything, and they intimidate. They come in screaming and shouting and belittling. And
we're talking just...
Mark had just had an operation to have his legs snapped and rebuilt.
Ooh.
And they dragged him round the house and fired him in the back of a police car.
I had a double osteotomy on my right leg for osteoarthritis. So
they were horrible.
For people who don't know what that is, you electively have your tibia and fibia broken.
And put back together.
And your femur also broken. And I had a bone transplant popped in, some metal work. And I was at I think probably the 11, 12 week recovery stage from that. So, I mean, I was moving, but with the aid of holding things. And I was handcuffed and taken to a police station, and I was kept in the cell for 14 hours, interviewed in the middle of the night. And to say I was angry was beyond an understatement. And when I found out that they'd arrested Lezley as well, then that was me just absolutely off the scale angry. Mm. Had they not arrested Lezley, I would have had no choice, despite me previously saying I would never plead guilty to a cannabis charge. I would have had no choice, but at some point I had to have pled guilty to that crop of growing cannabis. But because they'd arrested Lezley and put her in the cells for 12 hours and not fed her anything other than a Mars bar and stuff, I was particularly angry. And in the interview, if we pulled up the interviews or the recordings, I freely admit what I did growing cannabis. I had no problem admitting that whatsoever. But I clearly told them at the point of interview that I would never plead guilty for having grown that cannabis because I had a legitimate reason for growing it, i.e. Leslie's MS hadn't gone away and I had osteoarthritis that was untreatable and I didn't want to become an opiates addict. I told my surgeon at the time that I was using cannabis. There was no problem with the anaesthetist dealing with me while I used cannabis.
Apparently the cannabis will help with the bone density when the bone all heals back together. So it was actually a good...
So I was, despite having my leg electively broken in 3 places and all the work done in there and various other work in the knee, I was off any prescription painkillers within 21 days.
Just on cannabis.
And I recorded what I used. I was using cannabis oil and I was using cannabis. And when I was saying it wasn't small amounts, I was using as much as I could physically get my hands on. And I got through that operation, no problem, and then found myself in a court case because we were using cannabis. And, my surgeon had seen. Lezley had clearly documented that she'd been using cannabis for her ailments, and they really shouldn't have been bothering us for that.
I think it was the way they treat you. They were grabbing a hold of you and throwing you about and they chucked you in the back of a van. You had clearly just been in hospital for an operation. It was it was cruel and torture.
Well, it was definitely unnecessary.
Absolutely unnecessary. You can see me and Mark, we're both disabled. Neither of us can run, never mind put up
to top it off, our 7-year-old granddaughter was here at the time as well.
And this has gone through, my daughter's seen us being tortured all her young life, my family, and now my grandchildren. It absolutely broke my heart.
No grandkid needs to see their grandma being arrested for drugs. You know, it's just
and I'm a good grandma. I'm not a bad person in any way whatsoever.
So we fought that one again. I mean, despite losing the main cannabis case for the massive supply, this was personal, you know, and we just refused point blank to plead guilty.
At one point they said, can we let the case lie on file? And we'll leave it at that.
No.
I said, no, you can't, because that gives you an open door into my home anytime you like. It's not happening. You can sort it out now and stop being ridiculous with people who are ill.
It was said that if I pleaded guilty, they would drop the charges on Lezley. And I thought about that, and I said, well, if you drop the charges on Lezley, I'll plead guilty.
No.
But there's a subtle difference there between them allowing Lezley free if I plead guilty to me, dropping the charge the other way around. And so they refused that as well. So we took it to trial.
Take it all the way. There's no way they were making me walk away.
The press again got interested that Mark and Lezley had been arrested for 2 bars of chocolate, I think it was. And a few plants. And
again, on somebody's say-so, this is the other thing that needs to stop. This grass on your neighbour. If you smell a smell, tell the police. I mean, we've got a neighbour and they absolutely, it's hard work.
On that point...
it's tiring.
Yeah, I can entirely understand that. I mean, on that point, there is a lawful defence and something that needs testing in this country, and it has to get into a court of law for somebody to do it, is under the Equalities Act, discrimination against prescription medication and then against the prescription user. And so because you're not allowed to discriminate or sort of unduly inquire about the nature of somebody's illness or their prescription drug, if they prove they've got a lawful right to carry that drug, you can't intervene with it. So there is then the case of that. So then neighbours can't do what they're doing. There are guidelines being written and being sort of produced to go out to housing associations, to councils and to sort of landlords, etc. That with that magic piece of paper comes lawful protection for what you do. Again, there is a discretion within that around it. It says within the law vaping. Again, it's not tested in a UK court, but as was being continually told to me by prescribers and by people involved in the medical prescription system here in the UK, they recommend vaping. We recommend vaping. We don't recommend smoking.
Yeah,
so what does that mean? Can I smoke it? We don't recommend that.
Well, I got my private prescription taken off me. I did an interview on YouTube with some young men, Relief, and I was smoking a spliff in the interview. And the guy that prescribed my first private prescription seen the interview and refused to prescribe me again because I was using it wrongly. I wasn't vaping. I had it in a spliff, and he took my prescription off us. I was like I was some kind of dirty smackhead. It was quite shocking. So because I didn't vape the weed, I put it in a spliff. I got it taken off us. But I remember when I first got the very first script off him, I said to him, I put my cannabis in chocolate. I don't smoke it as much as put it in chocolate. And he says, it's your prescription. You can do anything you want with it. And 2 weeks later, he took the prescription off us because I put it in a split. From where I'm sitting, they don't know what they're doing. A lot of these issues that we've got now, it's new territory. The prescriptions, I mean, I'm hearing of people getting mouldy weed, underweight weed, and I've experienced all these things myself. It's a very new system, and it really, really needs to be worked on as quickly as possible because some of it, as you're pointing out,
we both know this. We both know, all three of us know the solution. That what most of us would rather be doing.
Just stop prosecuting people for using weed. End of story. It doesn't need to be a big.
I don't have a problem talking about growing weed because I've been charged and acquitted of doing just that, and you know, of all the things I've ever done, nobody's produced or brought me anything that I would consider touches anything that I would have produced myself.
Well, you know what's in it. You know it hasn't got chemicals in it. Hasn't been irradiated. It hasn't had some horrid fed.
Yeah, the placebo effect as well. It's the whole thing of growing your own tomatoes. And I'm not speaking euphemistically here, folks. Like actually growing your own tomatoes, and the taste of that, it's just fucking better. Even if
there's love in it. There's no love in this pharmaceutical box or packet that comes. You know, you open up this tinfoil pack that they send you, and you think, oh, this. What's in here? And then, lo and behold, there's something like that in there, and you think, well,
genuine Mediweed.
Has somebody sealed this up in where is it there? Has somebody sealed this up in a kitchen somewhere on a vacuum packer?
No difference.
And you know,
most of that happens just down the road from me in the Rock Show in Sunderland.
You know, this one isn't a Rock Show product, I'm sure, but just.
You would be asking.
I really can't get jumping up and down about this.
No, because you would be looking for something better. If you know,
it's even if it was the best thing, there is still something intrinsically unfair, unjust about the idea of going, wait, so I can't grow a plant where I can get an ounce a return for like £15-20 per ounce, but you want to charge me £220 an ounce? How are you helping me? This is exploitation. It's the hypocrisy of it. I mean, this is something that your court case was so coincidentally timed with obviously the sort of the changing in the law, the November 1st, 2018 creation of the Schedule 2 and the allowing of prescribing of cannabis-based products.
What really, really got my back up was we were done for production. And production's very different to cultivation.
The assumption is that yes, you're trying to enrich oneself.
And what was going on in my spare room or our spare room was us cultivating some cannabis. Mm-hmm. We weren't producing
personal
anything.
Use, not
there wasn't any production. The use of the term farm.
Outrageous.
You know, outrageous use of English language. Like, you know, that everything in court is based on the use of a very clever use of English.
It's a motive manipulation.
25 different things, and you can have an hour and a half, a 2-hour debate with people with their gowns on, discussing the merits of would, could, should, or may.
We did that in our court case.
You know, whilst on Planet Zog, and you're like, these people, they're tripping. They're absolutely tripping, and they're arguing over semantics of words, and you're past the relevance of person. You know, you're no longer people. Your situations that they're arguing about, and somebody has to win that argument.
Well, yeah, they all come, or the vast majority of people, once you get to that level of a judiciary, part of that system of institution, you have come through private education. And it's all that competition of, you know, the private boys' school of them debating, and that's how you get won over. That's literally what happened with Boris and fucking Cameron and all this shit that happened and led to Brexit, was just private school boys having a pissing contest. So at that level, they don't see you as humans. They go, well, in my case, actually, I'm going to use this word in this way, and legalese interpretation of this and this and this. And so they're just going, and it's a back and forth. And then after you guys are sent to prison or whatever, they go and have drinks together. And they go, oh, good show, old chap, good game.
We in the trial where we were found guilty for the chocolate, which we were taking very seriously. My defence lawyer, I think Leslie had a different legal team to myself in that one. My defence lawyer was a musician, and so was the judge, and they played some chamber music in the court over the lunch recess, and I just couldn't believe that level of complicity. It was just like outstanding. We go to the more recent trial. We were just it's hard to explain the last trial because that just wasn't real. Mm-hmm. You know, the series of events that came into that, how Leslie got her legal team. It's just unbelievable. You know, I'd gone and visited a local lawyer in Carlisle and spent 2 hours with him saying why I couldn't plead guilty. And basically it was on track record and recorded previous interviews, I always said you can't plead guilty if you're found in possession of cannabis. And to find myself charged again with possession of cannabis and cultivation, it was time to say, well, sorry, I can't plead guilty. For whatever reason, I can't plead guilty. And I spent 2 hours with the lawyer explaining why I couldn't plead guilty and why Lezley wasn't going to plead guilty.
No, I'll never.
And then gave him the choice of taking the case or not. And he said, well, I'd happily take this case on the merits of you not pleading guilty. And we had a lawyer. I went about my work and just left it to turn over a couple of days. And I was in a field at a festival. I was doing a lighting installation for a party. And the phone rang, and it was a guy on the phone who introduced himself as Tayyab Ali. And he was more than interested in taking the case. He really wanted to take the case. And then he explained he was a human rights lawyer, but he felt that this was a human rights issue, and he would be interested in taking this case. And it's like, marvellous. And he'd been pointed to us, gulp, by Crispin Blunt, who was a Tory MP for Reigate at the time, who had just launched the Conservative Drug Party Reform Group.
Policy, not party.
Well, policy.
Yeah, they weren't allowed to say they were part of the party.
No, policy. And he was interested in it, and he had this, and hey-ho, he put the hat round after this party launch thing, and we were like, what's going on here? You know,
people firing credit cards all over the place.
There were grow companies at this event, and
Tilray were there, and
various others there, and we were given one of his associates to talk to, and we gave him our story, and hey presto, several days later, Tayyab Ali gave me a ring saying he would like to represent us. He understood that we couldn't afford this, but he certainly wasn't legal aid. Mm-mm. But he felt he could do something for us, and he said, well, we'll do a GoFundMe. And the associate of the Reform Group put a GoFundMe up, non-party affiliated for Lezley, not myself. And it slowly trickled up, very slowly trickled up. We're watching other causes getting thousands of pounds thrown at it, you know, and we won't name any of them, you know. But I would have thought they were far less deserving than what. It
was a very expensive. So like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds. This
fund trickled up to 10,000 quid. Mm-hmm. And Tayyab said, yeah, we'll do this. And he found a lawyer from Garden Street Chambers, and his name escapes him for a moment. And they effectively got the case dropped without having to come to Carlisle. This was, again, just before Christmas. There's a pattern here emerging. Again, days before Christmas. We were called into court on a special visit, and I can't remember what it was. It was a paper shuffling exercise. And it was widely known that the case was going to be dropped there and then. And it wasn't, because Lezley hadn't kept up her prescription for that month. So the prosecuting CPS said, no, there's an anomaly here, and we're not happy with this. And I absolutely fucking exploded in the court. There was activists in the court, and they couldn't believe it. I fucking exploded. I tore. We had God love her, a relief barrister in looking after Lezley, and I just ripped the shit out of her. And it was adjourned, and we were sent away till after Christmas. And Tayyab on the phone was like, I can't believe this. They'd agreed to drop it. And we get into the new year for the actual court case start proper. And again, the court's full of activists, ourselves. They'd lined the police up who were witnesses. And we have our pre-trial amblings, and I was really, really, really angry with the police. they told lies in the statements, or there was anomalies in the statements that were just absolute crap. And my instruction to my brief and was basically just tear the police apart, make them out for the liars that they are. I don't care what happens here. They can jail me for 10 plants or whatever, but just destroy the police and make them think twice about going into a disabled woman's house again. And we got 10 minutes before it was due to go in, and the prosecution decided to offer no evidence, despite my clearly saying that there was 10 cannabis plants, X number of bars of chocolate and small bag of weed or whatever. None of it was contested, all freely admitted in my statements, and they decided that it wasn't in the public interest to continue. Despite it being in the public interest for 13 or 14 months from the inception of the raid to going to court, and all the while telling them from the chief of police who came and visited me in the cell that this isn't in the public interest to continue this. We will not plead guilty. Don't prosecute us. And the CPS prosecuted us, and true to our words, we didn't bend. We were not going to plead guilty.
We're not guilty of anything other than wanting to be well. I'm not pleading guilty to one of their charges that are they're not really.
No, it's economic, as you say. It's an economic. I would call it now an economic legalisation. So, if you can afford the fine, or in this case the fees for a private doctor and your monthly prescription, then you're hunky-dory, you're all right. But if you can't afford that and you grow yourself a plant in your closet or whatever, and they find that plant and they decide to prosecute you, they can then throw your whole weight of the law at you for something that is effectively a fine, or ought to be a fine. It's a licensing issue.
Well, yeah, it should be a boring brown envelope, letter in the post. Pay this. If you pay it within the first 14 days, the fine is halved. If you pay it after, it shouldn't even be that, but that's where it should be if it should be anything. I mean, what you've described there is the thing that I have seen as being a Mackenzie friend in courtrooms and working with Guy at Seed Our Future, and that is this paradox that public interest, not in public interest, that statement can mean two different things. Firstly is in the actual thing it means, which is from a lawful stance and the Crown and everything else, it's not worth it. There's no viable real reason. There's no danger, no harm, no foul. What the reason they kept you until 10 minutes before is in the hope that you guys will shit yourselves at the last minute and go guilty, because that is in the corporate interest. You are special. These medical people admit that they were bad and wrong, but the only way that they can be good and safe is by joining us. And so then every prosecution they get of the air quotes recreational consumer on this side is another thing towards their evidence of going, this is why we need to control the medical sector. All of this dirty weed, all of this contaminated bad weed, these druggies, these criminals, these county lines, devils, these you can see it. Like I said, that divergence of it. And so they were hoping to drag you into that room as one of the last people, ideally that poster child, as it were, at the turning of the 2008 law to go, see, all you legacy people, you have to get a prescription. All you people, you can't have what you can have, but you'll let you off if you join us, if you keep that prescription.
How a judge can make a ruling on somebody who's just been found not guilty to buy a prescription.
Yeah, that was good.
See, that's extortion.
Or come back to court. But that was the final. We've been found not guilty.
It was £1,000, that first prescription. I haven't got a farm on benefits, you know what I mean? I don't have any.
That first prescription, by the time we'd gone to Stockport, I can't remember the name of the place. Stockport. No, the legal clinic. By the time we went down there, had a day out to drive there, paid for the consultation, bought the product, it was 850 odd quid. And when it got to the second or third prescription, I'm going, this isn't possible.
We can't do this, no.
We were probably the first people, and Leslie has a Lezley Gibson page on Facebook from the campaigning or follows the story of the legal cannabis, of how the price suddenly becomes a haggle with IPS specials. I think, is it County Durham they're based over there somewhere? Northeast, they are IPS specials. And they were bringing in the Mediweed from...
Well, he asked you what you wanted to pay.
The Bedra can. And it literally became a haggle for a product you get in Holland for next to nothing.
Where they were trying to figure out the market rate. How much can we exploit these people for? What you've described here is the evidence is the same with the Sativex or anything else. It's you are punished not for the cannabis or anything else, but acting out of accordance with them. They've said, no, you're not allowed that. I know you said it helps you, but I've said no. You've denied. I've said no. So now you're being punished for breaking my rules. It's not about the things, and so all of it has been to push you into that thing of conform, and all alongside of this is what I was saying about the counter narratives. So you've been living this for 3 decades, along with thousands of other people in this country that have been caught up and been pieces within this larger jigsaw, as it were. They've been building this narrative in this system, as I call it, the medical cannabis industrial complex. And so they've commodified and co-opted every beneficial part of you lot. They've wrung you dry, and they've kept putting you through this fucking sausage-making machine until eventually you come out in the links that they want. Nice little universal links that'll give them that 850, that £1,000 a month. Oh, keep it going. And it's the dehumanizing nature of it. It's the fact that luckily, people like yourselves had the fortitude, and I'm not dismissing anyone that pled guilty at any point in time, to stand and do this. The history then has to acknowledge you. Like, so the reason they can't put you in a courtroom to find you not guilty is that goes on the record. We can't have that on the fucking record.
Absolutely not.
But if we can get as close as possible and then threaten you and you don't bend, we then go, oops, we'll lose that paperwork. And then when the people come along in 10, 20, 30 years, they're going to go, well, nothing happened yet. Until 2018, there was no medicine.
Somebody who's got a legal prescription for exactly the same thing as what they were growing. I mean, they would have been exposed. We would have exposed them had they continued that prosecution. And it wasn't in their interest to continue it. It had nothing to do with the public. The public's interest was for it to continue, really, by that point. You know, they'd driven it on 14 months. They'd tortured us with having to get dots over the I's and T's and all of this.
They did lose a load of evidence in the floods. I remember them coming
That was a previous now.
Unbelievable.
It was just unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable.
They feel... infallible. Again, your existence and your counterclaims to their narrative is so repugnant and repulsive to them because it's supposed to be, you said you had cannabis, yeah, guilty, it's over, what are you doing? What do you mean you're not guilty? You've said you had the cannabis. To them, it's an acts and statute thing. It's just, no, you have this, it is.
It was previously described as in the chocolate case, the police inspector in the dock loudly proclaimed that Lezley had been found not guilty by a perverse verdict off the jury, and the fact that she'd been found not guilty was an outrage. And you know, you've been found not guilty by your peers, and you're still poking it with a stick, trying to get us to say something different. And yeah, they got found as guilty for supplying 100,000 chocolate bars. For sure they found us guilty, but they also changed the rules and didn't allow us a defence. And if that case was to be run now with a defence, allowing the people who used the product to come forward, the jury wouldn't have found us guilty.
No.
Would have walked out of there. In fact, they probably wouldn't have continued it. They'd have probably dropped that one as well. And it's wrong that you can go 20 years from being found guilty of supplying something that now people are making millions out of. We always said we were doing for free today what the pharmaceutical company is going to make millions out of tomorrow. Yeah, and, you know, I said that back in mid to late 90s. And here we are in a situation where people are driving Porsches and people who are their end users can barely afford to put food on the table. And it's a shocker that people are being forced to spend around £200 plus the consultancy fee a month for something that should have no more monetary value than your average produce that's in the shelf.
It should be in the hands of a herbalist, not a bloody doctor.
So I'm still, nothing's changed with our position. We're just in a position now where the laws have forced us into a corner, but you've got to speak out. I think you've got to say what your truth is to the best of your ability without dropping yourself in the shit again. You know, because, you know, I've got more appearances in Crown Court for things that should just be a conversation between lawyers. And it's not just a week of your time in the Crown Court, it's a year to the build-up shuffling paper, putting things in order so that they can examine every minute part of your life. And the first part of a charge sheet now is when you get that drop through your door, is a means test. And the means test is to see what you own. Do you own a house? Do you own a car? How many cars do you own? Do you have a motorbike? You got a motor? What do you own? And they make you list the registration numbers of these assets. Mm-hmm. With the hope that when they find you guilty, they can look at what you've got and then decide to take off what you have. They can afford this because they have that. And it's again, you're being punished with a fine that a rich person could just shrug off. But as somebody who's lives their lives with work and disability to try and keep a roof over their head, they're hitting you with the ultimate threat. We will take your house.
And also, we're 60 now. We really don't want to lose everything we've worked all our lives for, legitimately, might I add. We aren't massive drug dealers who've made loads of money. We're just an average, ordinary couple. And for them to come after us and trying to take things off us it's just cruel, isn't it?
Yeah, to means test somebody for 10 plants and a couple of bars of chocolate. All right, we're going to see what we can take off you when we find you guilty.
It's another part of the intimidation tactic, like I said, of them hoping you'll then go and make a deal and go, okay, if we can keep our house and got to cough myself and make pressure there. Like they want you to quiver. They want you to shrink from them so that you will just go, yes sir, please sir, okay sir, here, I'll remortgage my house, you can have my money. This is just another asset grab. This is just another shakedown from the mafiosa upper classes. That's all this has ever been. For the past 30 years, they've been building this up. We haven't
got the right qualifications for them to leave us alone. We haven't got the right pieces of paper, as you say, for them to leave us alone.
And I think now, as you saw with what happened, so I just wanted to add some clarification, obviously, because you mentioned sort of Crispin Blunt earlier, helping connect you with the human rights lawyer. There was obviously an allegation made against him at a very interesting time when he was speaking out about some things. A couple of years have passed now. He's been rebailed as of April, I've got it somewhere here, April 2024 last year, pending further investigations. He obviously had to withdraw from several APPGs, all-party parliamentary groups that he was involved in, including several ones of drugs. The Conservative Drug Policy Reform Group that he founded also went into liquidation, owing £467,000 in debt, ironically to Rishi Sunak's Futures Fund, which was set up, I think, during COVID. But the reason I kind of wanted to reference that is his untimely demise and disappearing. I mean, he might be guilty. I'm not claiming anything towards it. I'm just, again, little tinfoil hat on here, folks. I think that he was kind of disappeared, that there was kind of your case, there was the changing of the law and the creating of the contradictory schedule. Schedule 1, so the people without the paper we can treat the same, no medical value, you dangerous criminals. Schedule 2, oh, it's okay, just pay us more money and you'll be fine. And to get rid of this championing, this movement in government, because there's no reason anymore for them to want, what do you mean you want to let them do their own drugs at home? No, we'll make more money, shut the fuck up. Here's your bribe, here's your lobby, let's do it, keep with us. And it's the creation, like I said, the fortification of that medical cannabis industrial complex. And they want that thing, they want patented medicines, they want to be able to continue to charge $32,000 a year for Epidiolex as a Schedule 5 drug in America now. Like, it's an absurdity. The amount of CBD that is in that thing, you could grow from a few plants intermittently across the year. Like, the scale and pricing of profit. Yeah, the profiteering
subjects. Off we go with the fact that none of the legally supplied cannabis has CBD in it.
Wait, this is the irony of what.
I'm scratching my head and just wonder what is going on here.
Well, under the law, they've managed to make this so weird. You have CBPMs, cannabis-based medicinal products designed for human consumption. That is the definition categorically that they've created. Then MHRA created a bunch of regulations and rules that literally end in the sentence, and this is where we get the smoking ban. The smoking of cannabis is prohibited. That's all it says. There's no law that's attached to, no punishment. It just basically means that they're saying that if you smoke it, your prescriber can withdraw it. If your prescriber doesn't withdraw it, you're still lawfully protected. There's maybe an issue with driving, so don't drive with a fucking joint in your mouth here, folks. Don't do that, because then you're not acting in accordance with your prescription.
Bad idea.
You are lawfully allowed to, if you wanted to, have a big old volcano bag, though, as long as it's not covering more than a certain percentage of your view or taking both of your hands. I'm being funny here, but my point...
It is a joke.
It goes back to the early days of the LCA and campaigning, and Don Barnard, rest his soul, said clearly, when cannabis is legalised, it will be legalised when they can swab you or test you for cannabis behind the wheel and take your licence. And his whole specialisation in the legalisation of cannabis certainly was cannabis and driving and how they are going to torture you. Several well-known early cases, Jerry Ham in the late 90s was famously arrested in London for having nothing more than the roach torn off his Rizla packet. And the guy ended up in court over that. You know, a torn Rizla packet caused a furore and a court case. And we'd have to look at that again. Jerry Ham, torn Rizla packet. And you know, I met him at a conference.
They ruin people. We're joking and laughing, but they ruin people's lives.
You know, he with disabled children, disadvantaged children or something. And it was a huge issue for him at work and stuff. And torn Rizla packet.
Just unbelievable.
And the coppers say so.
Yeah, if he'd have been pulled over and there's a bottle of whiskey in the footwell, he'd have probably kept his... back then, he'd have definitely kept his job. He'd have got prosecuted and fined, but society'd have been like, oh, you idiot, you got caught. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's the societal attitudes versus the legal presentation of what they say this is are worlds apart. And like I said, over the time that people like yourselves have been brave enough to be active and pushing that rock up the...
I'm going to question the word brave. I think
stubborn. Then
none of this was elective. You know, we didn't choose this.
No.
Yeah,
I'll go with stubborn, and it's not a case of we chose to do this at any point.
No, they made us do it.
You know, the THC for MS thing, we freely chose to do that. But pretty much everything else has been a reaction to a court case or an impending court case.
And also, how do you, when people are coming to you and saying, can you help me to be as well as you are? How do you say no? How do you turn around to them and say, no, go away, I'm not sharing my secret with you, go away? I could never have done that with other people. Never. And I think that's why I got into so much trouble, because I couldn't shut up. I was too... If I knew somebody was suffering, I would say, look, why don't you try this? It's worked absolute marvels for me. You know, and it's better than the chemicals the doctors try to put you in.
Yeah, well, it's like I said, it's the spreading of esoteric knowledge through non-official channels. It's the healing of communities that are not profiteering those in power. You know, it's the liberation of the spirit and the soul, because that's the other thing that they are truly scared of cannabis of, is it what it kind of does to you as an individual when you consume it. You can be this hyper-focused capitalist, I make $100,000 a year and I've got my Mercedes and and just fall into a cannabis kind of hole and have a summer of weed or whatever. I'm not saying this will happen to all people, because obviously cannabis is being commodified, and I think these new cardboard terps and all the new cultivars have almost had the rebellion bred out of it somehow. I'm not saying I know how the science of that. This is, again, a real conspiratorial...
They're loving it.
But I do feel like so much of the new weed, you like I just want to consume. I want to eat shit. It just feels a weird thing compared to a lot of the old cultivars I started on as a young man, a young teenager and stuff, that were like, let's burn it down. You know what I mean? Let's go. Come on, we can build a better society than this. And then it's turned to, and I think that's because they've sort of, I don't mean literally that they've changed the plant, but they've changed the culture. They've infected it with ideas of capital, of, you know, neoliberalism, of commodification of cannabis, of going, wait, but you could be a billionaire. You can say you're healing the world and be a billionaire and have a guy at the same time. And you can have that. I'm a TikTok shaman. I've got 1 million followers, and have all this, you know what I mean? The juxtapositions of these things, the hippie trail, you know, the move back in the day that people would take to go through to Bali and shit in India, and the journeys people would undertake, and they take LSD and mushrooms and all these other things, and we had this counterculture movement that these drugs and substances were attached to, Then cut to this generation, you've got Crispin Blunt, like I said, setting up the Conservative Drug Policy Reform Group. There was also, I hear folks, a Labour Drug Policy Reform Group, intimately tied. Whole thing, we'll talk about that in a future episode.
He clearly said to us he did that, formed the reform group basically because they all had personal interests, i.e. family members, children, etc. They were getting busted for drugs. And you can't have his up-and-coming lawyer's life ruined because he took a knee on a Saturday night and happened to get caught with it on the Sunday morning or whatever, the one he didn't take.
That's exactly what we've seen. This is what I'm saying. They changed the culture, so it was people would be hippies. You'd have your dreadlocks, your baggy clothes. You'd have all this iconography, these totems, these signifiers of that you belong to this culture. So you could always spot a pothead back in the day, is what I'm saying. And then what they somehow managed to do is then the normies got involved in it, and then through the 80s and cocaine becoming the ultimate drug, and people go, let's have a look at these drugs. You don't have to be a dirty hippie or a wrong'un or a dropout or a beatnik. You can just take drugs and hold down your 9 to 5. And then when they started getting caught up consequently in the war on drugs, it was their kids. All the time, if you got caught, say, at Eton with cocaine or whatever, you'd go, headmaster, no, I'll give you 200,000 for a new wing, and little Jeremy didn't do nothing, did he? Yes. And so once they then got the real world and started having consequences, that's where we've got this whole movement for legalization, this whole medicinalization of these compounds, why they set up these things to create medical avenues for mushrooms, medical avenues for cannabis, for LSD, for DMT, for ketamine, for all these other things, so that they could take it lawfully with their money and their protection, and then actually go to their business meetings and go, well, there was a guy in America gave like a fucking speech, a fucking CEO, after taking ayahuasca, and wrote this fucking valedictorian style-esque sort of speech of being like, well, I'm protected and I'm now superior and I'm like this uber mensch because of the experiences I've been and had. And you're like, mate, yeah, but if somebody gets caught in this place now with DMT extracted that they've extracted at home themselves, that's like 25 fucking years. That is still like Schedule 1 Class A in most places. Like, that is a scarily dangerous drug. But they can now make anecdotes. You can have celebrities like Will Smith joking about it. They've created this two-tier reality, as you were saying. And medicinal, as long as you say it's a medicine, that's what they've done in Thailand. And they're going to completely fuck that when the way they moved it back onto narcotics and played with this and that is going, as long as you all say it's medicinal, you're fine. If you dare say you're doing this not for medicinal purposes, we will punish the shit out of you. No, this is medicinal, it's medicinal, it's medicinal.
Well,
it's just toeing the line. That's what I'm saying. It's not about the drug, it's about following their rules. As long as you follow their rules, they're happy.
And Mark knows. Mark was at private school. He was sent to one of these private schools, and he knows these people.
I didn't know this.
He knows exactly.
I've been outed, man.
He knows exactly what you mean.
The point I'm going to make is like all use is medicinal.
Yeah.
It's the urgency of use. So
I'm exempt. It creates the paradox so that they can feel safe of going, well, no, you should be punished for it. That poor guy on the street injecting heroin, he should be punished for it. But if I want to sniff cocaine with the lads on Friday,
all good.
different, yeah. And it's that hypocrisy that they've codified into law that I have the biggest problem with, and they can't see it. So if all of those people in charge go, well, yes, what do you mean? Why hasn't he got a ketamine prescription? Why hasn't he paying the £10,000 to do the infusions? Why are you sniffing the bags at festivals? Like, they can't understand the culture and the idea of wanting to enjoy drugs. In their head, it's like an experience, the same way they pay to go and queue up for Everest to tick it off their list, to go, look how good of a man I am. I've climbed Everest. I've been on this trail in Africa. And it's just these experiences to put together a portfolio and a guise of a human being. Do you know what I mean? And so they're tourists into our culture and our lives, and they're pretending, well, it's medicinal this and rec this and la la la. It's like, you are the oppressor, you are the colonizer, you are the gentrifier. Get the fuck out of our culture.
There really isn't any difference between medicinal and recreational use.
It's just legalese. That's what I said. It's will you lie?
Use. So Leslie's MS might demand that she needs to use immediately, or she's going to start being paralysed. I may need to use it a little bit sooner because I'm going to suffer pain. Whereas somebody else might just need to chill that out.
I think that should be scaled up, should it not? To then, we live in a world now. I'm 36. When I was younger, in my teenage years, it was 1 in 4 people would get cancer in this country. Statistics now 1 in 2. If every other person is going to get cancer, and cannabis causes apoptosis and cancer cells, surely we could prophylactically be using cannabinoids to stop the fucking pandemic of cancer. No? You know what I mean? It's
might be an idea.
Yeah, microplastics and shit like that. I mean, cannabis graphene, we can filter shit. There's then oxidized graphene that the big boys are playing with. Science, my brain can't get its head around. But they're playing with oxidized things of cannabis-derived graphene that is then structurally changing things in your body. Like, there's something going on that they're branching into with all of their research and development. They've been spending billions on this. And the only reason I feel that they let legalization a little bit happen is to recoup some of their losses in this research and development. I see this as exactly what they did with, Pavera somnaria, the opium poppy, a benign plant that was all over the world and people smoked it, people took it, people just derived shit from it in their little gardens, smashing it up and putting it in pipes, putting it in teas, extracting it into various things. And then the big boys came along and found all these different products that they could derive from it, all these opioids. And then this century of exploration of killing millions of people, of addicting millions more people, and of dominating that sector. I feel we're just living in the blip of them taking control of cannabis. So in the same way that heroin was sold in the 1890s in fucking Sears magazine, and you could just buy heroin in a nice little case, and it was all lovely. That was, again, what I was saying I think is happening now with the prescription system, is they're just letting everybody use it so they can see what happens, and then if it becomes problematic use, they come in and go, this is why we need to regulate. We're going to turn this into a medicinal product. Only doctors can prescribe it rather than selling it over the thing. Only certain people can have it, and then and it's then creating maintenance drugs for you to consume those cannabinoids for the rest of your fucking life, rather than being able to grow enough at home to be self-sufficient.
Another psychosis that's caused by cannabis that I read about the other day, that a sickness psychosis, where you're constantly being sick.
Oh, so it's a cannabis hypermesis syndrome. Yeah, so there's something not right here. From what I've looked at this, it's glyphosate. So there seems to be a correlatory thing that glyphosates that are used then in pesticides and fertilizers and stuff like that on food crops seems to be then related to things like what's it called, the catch-all of like irritable bowel syndrome and Crohn's and things like that. Yes. We know through looking at the endocannabinoid system that these are theorized to be part of a condition called chronic endocannabinoid deficiency syndrome. And so we're seeing something going on with the cannabinoids on the receptors and in modulating the gut. And we now know that the gut produces more of the neurohormones that run the brain than the brain does. So what happens here controls this shit. It's like the food linked to depression kind of thing. And from the research that I've done somewhat extensively in different fields, but it's very contentious because obviously a lot of companies making a lot of goddamn money, that there are these problem with these chemicals that are compounding, especially in vapes and oils, that then people that are taking these at large doses, it's fucking with their internal system. That there is something else, because once you start to extract these products, even if it's 1 point per million in that plant across the whole spectrum of the plant, when you condense all that plant down and that product doesn't disappear but loads of the other product does, you increase the potency of that. And so there are so many things. We were talking about this last week with the Mendo Dope Boys. I think there's 20 something different pesticides that are currently listed as like, nah, you're not allowed to use in cannabis in California, that are openly being listed by the fucking companies themselves when they give the paper to the Cannabis Control Bureau that they're using it. And so in legal states, cannabis hypermesis syndrome seems to be exploding through the roof. But in places where there isn't these lawful access things, it doesn't seem to be increasing. So I think there's a correlation between what they're doing and their practices, because you or I would never put some of these fucking chemicals. There are, granted, people that use PGRs, plant growth regulators, or retardants and things like that. Yeah, but most people then use the product themselves. They want to go to as close to organic, as close to as nature as possible. Whereas you've got this expression, and I fucking hate it, I don't smoke it, bro, I just sell it.
Oh, no.
They are the bad people in cannabis, I see. I know some of you dealers, some of you are lovely fucking people, and you do buy and sell from other people, and you actually do have, quality standards and control. But there is an incredible amount of shit in the UK market. There's an incredible amount of shit in most cannabis markets, and I think that that's just the first. I think there will be other things that we're starting to then see. We know from volatilization of what are they called? Spores from things like aspergillosis and other molds that can be found on cannabis can cause psychosis. We've obviously known for a while the way that the science works, and it was Lester Grinspoon, who kind of is the man that I'm thinking of that really kind of put a fucking dot on this, was talking about schizophrenia. If you have a populace or a certain amount of the people are schizophrenogenic, likely to have schizophrenia, and you increase something that is schizophrenic that will cause more schizophrenia, and it doesn't uptake, then that thing doesn't cause schizophrenia. So the schizophrenic rate in America is about 1% of the populace. Always has been. Yet cannabis has exploded in use since sort of the jazz era, the 1920s, 30s, etc., when it's sort of brought up as Mexican bushweed, effectively, or identified as such.
We were invited to a grow in Groningen, in Holland, many years ago, Bedrocan. And we asked questions that they didn't want us to ask. We asked what they fed them on. They wouldn't tell us. Now, we also noticed the pots were covered in mould. The place was dirty. It was dirty.
The only point that they wouldn't allow me to see was the feeding station. And you could clearly see from drippers that it was a 2-pack, some sort of solution. So I'd have imagined it would have been the cheapest 2-pack salt mix possible growing Bedrocan. I got pictures of this.
We were horrified, weren't we?
You could see the pool of salt around the pot.
And green mould on everything. And it wasn't hygienic. It certainly wasn't like we did it.
It's the lack of love and pride as well.
Exactly. There isn't any love in it.
Yeah, so you or I would then, I mean, in times when I have grown, I generally will keep a sterile space. I don't like bugs, you know what I mean? And so I wouldn't then get in predator bugs to deal with bugs. So if anything, we go into quarantine. You know what I mean? When I do grow, I'm not saying I do or don't grow now, I fastidiously look at those fucking plants. I'm checking for every sort of bacterial disease. I'm checking for every bug. I'm checking for traces of everything.
And you want it to be pure
because of your pride as well. Like that's my plan. I want to really fucking look after that. And if something gets in, and if you leave it for a week, 2 weeks or whatever, I mean, touch wood, I've never had spider mite. It's one of my worst things in my brain. But I've had thrips, I've dealt with aphids, you've dealt with this, dealt with powdery mildew living in the bloody north. There's all kinds of things, but you learn how to deal with these things. You learn how to create a cleaner system. You learn how to strip down between grows. And spaces like their producer, like, no, we need 6 crops a year. Squeeze it in, constant conveyor belt, more. And they're happy to go. Because again, we're limited to going, I'd rather grow a few plants, but really well. They're like, no, just grow whatever, millions of them. Just millions of them. Just keep more plants, bigger.
There's a place for that, but, it's not what I was aiming for, that's for sure.
But I think there's, speaking to people like Steve D'Angelo, who was like considered the godfather of like the Californian industry and others, they now believe there is a cap. You can't scale beyond a certain point because even with, say, as they're now doing, bringing in artificial technology and radar, LiDAR, all these things combined to create like a robot in your grow room that knows everything, can use lasers to kill this and blow, like all the crazy shit they're going for, that will only ever have a limit because there will still be some problem that will be created by the ecosystem that you created, the microbiome of that space. There'll be something that you can't control, some variable, and there is this, I still call it the fuck you ability of cannabis. Like, you've seen it, maybe yourselves known as growers, actually maybe different for yourselves, but like, as somebody as a cash grower, if you're then banking on your plants, the number of times your plant will hermy 2 or 3 weeks before the end, there's something in that plant going, are you already spending me? You planning on going on holiday, son? Bananas everywhere. There's something in the plant that you need to carry that intention through. And I've read a lot of the science. I'm very well educated here. I know this sounds insane, but from my own experience for like decades of being around the plants and shit, there's something in her that she'll be like, no, you better love me till the last minute or else.
You ain't doing that. Have some bud rot. How do you feel about that?
I agree with that, absolutely.
And it's not quantifiable. Yeah, and that's what I think the white business suits in there, no matter how sterile or whatever they choose to do, will never beat somebody being empowered and choosing to take the autonomy of their healthcare, of their own spirituality, of their own mental journey, of their own cognitive capabilities.
It's empowering.
And it's that relationship, it's symbiotic. It grows with you. The plant then goes, you really give a fuck, here you go. And you go, oh, I love you. And it goes, I love you. And you go, I love you. And it goes, I love you. And you get this reciprocal benefit. And you sound like a crazy fucking hippie. But it's true. It is so fucking true. The more intimate of a relationship you have with this plant, I don't know, it's... Yeah, I grew up and had a really tough fucking childhood, and the idea of nature and being outside and camping and wildfires and fuck all that. But then when I started growing cannabis, I've got hundreds of houseplants. Do you know what I mean? I'm barefoot in the forest. You know, I'm having fires on the beach, and I'm fucking taking mushrooms, and I was taking other drugs anyway. But in terms of like the intention and it, I feel that cannabis, regardless of intent, brings you back into your body.
It opens your mind to be more receptive to other ideas. And I mean, before I was a hairdresser before I got MS and started using cannabis, and all I was interested in was makeup and high heels. Using cannabis has certainly made me a little bit more sort of natural and humanitarian and all that kind of thing. I think it just opens you up to humans, and again,
different things
the word
matter.
Love. The word love comes back again. It's
Norman Shack said, you know, if you smoke cannabis, then it will change you, and it certainly does, and definitely for the better.
Oh God, yes.
I haven't seen a negative effect other than one that was printed in a newspaper on the front page or whatever. They're howling at you on the telly.
The only bad thing about cannabis is the illegalities of it. That's the only bad thing that I can, in my decades of doing what we do, the only bad thing I've seen with cannabis is the police and the law. And I say when they come in my house, you know, it's a job. There's some jobs you don't do. And taking medicine off ill people is a job I would not do. If I was a policeman, I would say to my boss, I am not doing that. The same as when I was a hairdresser. If someone come in with nits, I would refuse to do their hair. If someone was ill and needed medicine, I would refuse to take it off them. And if I was a policeman, I most certainly wouldn't make it my job to persecute and torture ill people, which is what they do when they come in my house. Yeah. And it's disgusting. It's a disgusting way to treat ill people. And I tell them, I bet your mum's proud of you going around disabled people's houses and taking the medicine of them. You know, Hitler's henchmen. Oh, no, that's the next thing they'll say. I'm just doing my job. Yes, well, that's what Hitler's mates used to say as well. And I don't care what anybody said. Very dramatic, yes, but it's the same kind of persecution. I have people look down the noses at me over the years because I use cannabis. Mm-hmm. I made myself be able to function as a human being from using cannabis. And I'm not going to be sorry for that. And I'm never going to be guilty, ever.
No, should you be? I mean, some people will say it's a hyperbolic comparison, but I think it's quite apt in the sense that the Nazi persecution of the Jews was arbitrary. They literally went, there are characteristics about you I don't fucking like, fuck you. And they'd make science up. They made all kinds of science about how Jews were sinister, about how there was something wrong with their genes, how they were inbred, all of these different bullshit that they came up with, and saying they were conniving, underhanded, they controlled the money, they were to put the populace against them. That's exactly what they've done with cannabis since criminalizing it in the 1971, or even earlier in the 60s. They were starting to demonize and create this idea that them bad, this smell means evil people.
Mm-hmm. And putting leaflets through people's doors, telling them to tell tales on people. How does that make community spirit? How does that make love thy neighbour? You know, it's just horrible.
It's not. Doesn't make for good neighbourhoods.
That's not what they want. Because if the neighbourhood was strong, in a strong neighbourhood, and they came in and started smashing someone's door, and then everyone came out and went, "What the hell are you doing to our neighbours?" Mm-hmm. Like, they've got a plant in there. Everyone would be like, "Fuck you." Yeah. Like, if we actually knew about each other and cared for each other in that way, instead of being put against each other and going, "You've broken arbitrary infraction. Oh my God, he broke a rule. Like, we're so fucking mental with what they have done to us, with how broken and how, like, I don't want to say neutered because I don't want to make it a sort of a gendered thing of like fortitude, but yeah, they've taken our ability for us to want to defend each other and ourselves. They've made us feel that if we just keep our head down low enough and quiet enough, we'll have just enough to survive. And if all we think about is survival over a long enough period of time, the idea of revolution doesn't come about. And because they're only repressing us lot, they're not repressing all of us, just the dirty hippies, then it ends, because you can see it, there's the people that they prosecute and the people that they go after. You know, somebody smoking a joint in Tunbridge Wells, you know, some well-to-do students out, they're not going to get punished. We see this in Durham, two-tier policing in Durham with the fucking university students. They get caught with drugs on a night out, they get dropped at their dorms. A local gets caught with drugs, you know what I mean? They're through the cells, kicked out the next morning, got a charge, they're going... The hypocrisy, because that's where the problem will always falter with this, with them medicalizing, medicinalizing, whatever you want to call this action that they're undertaking, until they liberate the individual. Then we're not addressing the root cause of the problem, and they will only ever cause more problems. Even if they get 99.99% of people onto prescriptions and everybody plays the game and says it's medicine for everybody, it can only be medicine. That's tiny fraction of 0%.
You can't have that, because it was clearly stated in the Crown Court that cannabis has no medicinal value. So we have to rewind to that point and say, well,
but this is where they instead of what they could have had to do if they'd changed the law in one way, they created a contradiction. So in there's the 1971 Misuse of Drugs Act, right? That makes cannabis a Schedule 1 Class B. There is then the 2001 Misuse of Drugs Regulations with the 2018 amendment for CBPM, which makes cannabis a Schedule 2 Class B. So Schedule 2 means some medicinal value with a high propensity to abuse and addiction. Schedule 1, no accepted medicinal value. So when they catch you with your Schedule 1 under the 1971 Act, because you don't have the magic piece of paper that turns it into the 2001 Act.
I didn't exist then, you see.
But yeah.
They're still thinking about the magic piece of paper.
And that's what I'm thinking, is that they've then now created that system so that retrospectively, until we get the law changed, you can't have an expungement for your previous convictions. They stand because you were wrong and it doesn't matter. I think of the injustice of, and again, this might sound hyperbolic to some people, of like Alan Turing, a man whose intellect helped beat the Nazis and win the Second World War, who was then chemically castrated by the state for being a gay man, because it used to be illegal to be homosexual. It wasn't until posthumously, after his death, the state apologized. Like, we need to change. It's not just the law that changes in a way to do whatever. There has to be that change and that step to go back as well as forward. You can build your billion-pound industries and whatever, but you have to look back, like you said, at the lives you've ruined, at the convictions you have against people that now can't travel, can't get certain jobs, can't aspire to certain things, whose family 20, 30, 40, 50 years after the fact still thinks that drug ruined their lives, when the drug didn't do nothing to them. It was prohibition and the law. It was the fact they got caught that harmed them. That's not to say that all drugs are perfect and no harms can happen. Drugs can precipitate a psychosis type event. They can facilitate a temporary breaking of one's consciousness. The same thing happens most of the time with alcohol. We just call it drunk instead of psychotic. But as somebody that's consumed enough alcohol in my life, I can tell you I've been psychotic from alcohol. I can tell you that if I go out on a Friday and Saturday night into the city centre, I will find plenty of people who are in a way of psychosis. But we're not allowed to call it drug-induced psychosis, because we're not even allowed to call alcohol a drug. So there's just these layers of hypocrisy in our culture that, again, through the stubbornness of people like yourselves, if we're not going to call it then bravery, I still say the fact when you were faced with the option of cowering and kowtowing down to the authority, or to stand up for your own morality and decency, and to know that in the future you want to look back and go, no, I did the right thing. Like, that I
want to test it again, though.
I think it touched all the fucking wood you fucking have to. I really hope that. I mean, there's going to be thousands more that currently. There's somebody right now somewhere in this country who's just been pulled over. Their life's about to be ruined. There's somebody who's just...
I know there's cases of people with prescriptions going through it, and they're prosecuting them with the prescription.
And we're talking about this... The aftermath and the effect that these court cases and this being persecuted and prosecuted constantly has on somebody, whether they're ill or not, is unbelievable. Mm-hmm. The toll on my health from this is terrible. My mental health shot to pieces. I don't trust anybody. If I see a copper, I'll run the other way. And I shouldn't be having to live like that. I shouldn't have to be terrified of coppers who were supposed to protect me and look after me. I wouldn't go near a copper if somebody was stabbing me. I really wouldn't, because what he would do is he would arrest me for smoking weed, and I am sick to death of this two-tier. You know, all I ever wanted to be was well. I never wanted to be a criminal. I never wanted to be a brave cannabis campaigner. I just wanted to be well. And ultimately, taking people like me back and forward to court and coming in the houses and raiding them is just cruel. Absolutely cruel beyond belief and unnecessary. A waste of time, a waste of money, the toll on people's health, mental and physical. It's just so unbelievable that this is still happening.
It is, and it feels like we said before about that idea of public interest and corporate interest. When you look at it, and if you were to just be saying alien that landed on Earth, could speak English and understand our syntax and everything all correctly and perfectly, and you presented this evidence to them, they went, well, there's this drug, and there's all this evidence of what it is and what it does and all the non-harms and the potential small micro-harms that could happen in a small population and the amount of some people that may have a psychosomatic addiction, etc., etc. And then there was this response to it. And then you ran that through them and you had this conversation and you go through it. The only outcome, the only result of that equation to me is the protection of corporate copyrights. It's future speculation. It's narrowing and tapering a market into 5 or 6 conglomerates, the same as we have with every other industry in the world. There is just a bunch of people that own all of it.
Yeah.
And after time, like I said, nobody would even think now of the idea of growing their own opium. No one would even think of, like, wait a minute, if you're going to be prescribing me Oxycontin or something like that, you're going to be prescribing me this detrimental and potentially lethal drug that at any point I could just kill myself with, why can't I grow that plant and smoke it? With a much less risk level, with a much lower addiction rate, with a much more natural thing. I can mix it with hashish like we used to back in the day, you know what I mean? Like, I say back in the day, not my day, guys. I mean, like, back in the day, like ancient times, it was a very common practice. Still is in a lot of places. But again, the persecution of opium consumption through the same mechanism that happened in the west coast of America is what kind of led, you can actually draw quite big parallels. Between like an indigenous group of people or a certain populace that consume a thing in a certain way that then results in a certain thing being co-opted by a larger system. They're then punished, criminalized and demonized while their product is industrialized. And that's exactly what I see is happening with cannabis. And in 20, 30, 40 years, we'll look back at it and go, oh yeah, because the idea of cannabis being lawful and or even flowers being prescribed in the future is going to be like, what the fuck? The people won't believe you. Like that anecdote when I said that heroin was sold in fucking a Sears catalog in America. Like it just was. That's what Bayer did with it. It was until the Opium Act and like the Food Safety Act in 1906, etc., and the conventions in 2230, whatever it was. It was just a ubiquitous drug. Because they wanted to, in my opinion, again, like I said, get as many people onto the thing, and then when they draw it back and they can then start inking the price up, you'll pay the fucking price. If you're an oxy addict, when they were charging $50, $100, $200 for a tablet and shit on the street, people were fucking paying it.
Yeah. I remember Mark's grandma telling us she used to go and buy Purple Hearts at the chemist. And it was perfectly acceptable. You know, and then, as you say, they fiddle with the law and they want to make more money, etc.
Well, yeah, ephedrine was a big one for my generation. Like most of my millennial mothers were at some point given ephedrine, which was like an analog of amphetamines, and it was just the little diet pill, the little helper. And these things have always existed sort of within culture, and they become then hyper-normalized. And it is this thing of, you look at the homeless man on the street and his needle, and that dirty smackhead, that rage that it brings in these fucking idiots. And then they look at this grandma on tramadol, on oxy, on on oromorph, oh, isn't she lovely and sweet? And she's absolutely off her fucking tits, being racist as hell, hateful, and everyone's like, it's fine, it's just a side effect of the medication. But that wonderful homeless man that's dealing with 30 years of abuse, that happens to sneak away and uses heroin and sits on the street humbly saying hi and good morning to people, that is a pillar of his community, even though he doesn't have a fucking place to sleep or a pillow to lay his head on. The juxtaposition is fucking insane to me. That again, it's following their rules makes you good, even if it makes you evil. That's what the Nazis were about. We're just following orders. You're a good person, then, aren't you? I killed how many? Yeah, you're a good person. It doesn't matter. Righteousness is irrelevant, like right or wrong morality. It's are you? I told you to do something. You haven't. I'm going to ruin your fucking life. And they're hitting the end point of this. They're struggling, and so what they've done is now they're just get a prescription. Here's a prescription. We'll get it cheaper, honest. We'll get it cheaper. We'll use your phones now. We'll do it over the internet. It'll be 2 minutes. And they're just doing anything. They're getting as close as they can to retain the control they have, but basically a pipeline so that everybody. What's going to happen? I can truly see this coming. Is the police will stop people for cannabis in the future and go, "You need to get a prescription. I'm writing this thing. You've got 28 days to contact a doctor and get a prescription and show us this." It's the same as, if you didn't have your license in America, you've got a summons. You then get a summons. You've got to then come and show your license within X amount of time, or else we're going to assume you don't have a license and fuck you. I think that's what cannabis is going to be like in the next couple of years in this country. I think Germany's going to collapse in the next few weeks. In February, the fucking far right are getting in, whether it's AfD and the Christian Union in a coalition, or it's just the Christian Union parties in Bavaria and Germany. They're going to reverse legalization while ramping up medicalization. We're already seeing it. The German market has doubled in size since it legalized, as in the medical market, when only, I think, 2 days ago, the first grow was delivered from the first cannabis cultivation club in Germany. It's the hampering of one while the building of the other. It's the pacification of the people's pleas for legalization and freedom till they build a ubiquitous system enough of going, just buy the paper and you're good. And I think, again, Germany has an interesting history of papers, please. Do you know what I mean? This whole conversation might sound hyperbole to some people, but if you have, like you guys have lived this, if you have, like I have lived this over the past 10 years, all I've done is be obsessed with this and trying to understand why I can't be safe. You say you want wellness, I want safety. My little possibly tism brain, it can't quantify this reality. I need surety. Then when the war is over, I can maybe decide what I want to do. Hopefully it won't be when I'm retired. I want to work. I want to get out into the world and have a career and a job. I just can't because I feel unsafe at every moment because they can take my door off. They can crash my car and pull me over. They can fucking just destroy me for the way I smell, even with a prescription, like you said. It doesn't matter if they're not going to get the end prosecution. They'll still run you through the rigor and embarrass you and destroy you and break your soul and your spirit. Because how dare you stand against us? That's all this is just the increasing acceleration towards authoritarianism. And so frankly, I think growing a plant is an act of rebellion. It's an act of revolution. Truly, if you put seed to ground and do it to yourself, that's what you are engaging in a way. That system is going, no, we've created a new, like, no, we don't need you. We never needed you. You need us to exploit to get rich. If enough of us plant our own seeds and do what you guys have done for years and trade amongst ourselves, create our own economy and our own culture and our own community, we will insulate ourselves from their bullshit. Granted, some of us will have to go to court, but if enough of us plead not guilty, if enough of us turn up, I know we've tried this and we've seen this over the years. You guys have been there. But we've got more consumers than ever before in this country. The global consciousness of what cannabis is has never been more available. You can Google in a minute tens of thousands of papers that prove the scientific validity and the medical value of this plant. I think there just needs to be an alternative narrative, an alternative group. There has been, the Legalized Cannabis Alliance, and it became sort of clear. There have been movements like the Clubs. There have been various organizations, entities, and people that have tried to champion this. But I still feel that there is something missing because every group falls into their narrative of being controlled opposition. Legalize this, legalize. I don't want legalize. I've for 2 years now I'm not a legalizationist. I'm a decriminalization deschedulist. Remove it from all scheduling, decriminalize all cannabis-related personal offenses, and then you can do whatever the fuck you want with your corporate level. I don't care. But if my people are free and not one of us can ever be persecuted for our smell again, you can't go out, you got red eye, whatever. Then that's the win for me. It doesn't matter how many billions are made. It doesn't matter that we've got 20 companies on the stock market. It doesn't matter there's 33, 34 clinics. All of these things are arbitrary and represent a fortification of the new enslavement we're moving into, in my opinion. That we're missing this touchstone point of history. Like we've come from, it's never going to happen. Oh, it might happen, it might happen. And I'm going to go further actually away from our point of decriminalizing the individual, of meaning that you shouldn't have a limit at home. If you want to grow 100 plants, you grow 100 plants. I'm not advocating you at home right now to grow 100 plants, folks. I'm just saying that in the world that I would like to see, there shouldn't be that individual cap. The limits shouldn't be on you. If you want to grow carrots, there's no cap on what carrots you can grow. If you want to grow tomatoes and make your own ketchup, Heinz can't shut you down. You know what I mean? There's a different levels to this shit that needs to be understood, and that hypocrisy has to be brought to light.
Absolutely.
Sorry, just pontificated there for a minute.
You're dead right. You're dead right.
I'm looking at my notes because we're a bit into this. We've been here for a couple of hours. I appreciate your time. I am trying to limit these because I got a stupid jaw injury last year that is irritating, which is why you probably see me pull faces. It's not because I'm bored, it's because I've got a little bit of an injury here. But yeah, so let's do a couple of quick fires and we'll wrap this up then. So I suppose let's finish the story, the chronology of events. So you got then the 11th hour, I think is the expression, sort of no further action, not in the public interest.
Still going to tell it off.
Why, of course. You did what they told you not to do. I said no and you did anyway. Like, if they just wish they could spank you. That's I swear is what it is. It's just this really warped governmental child-parental relationship, and they just do what I told you. So what came next from that? I mean, we're in 2025 now.
Hey, we had our heads down.
No, they knocked us sideways. The both of us were absolutely,
basically, yeah.
We were battered, totally battered.
What have we done since then?
We just kept our heads down.
I went to work and behaved like a good person.
But also, the cannabis world's changed a little bit because there's a lot of money-making people now in there, and not everybody's the nice hippie that they were in the old days. It's
as fragmented as ever.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah. The infiltrators have infiltrated. I mean, you got the LCA was dismembered because of money-making people who decided to take it over.
Or people with egos or whatever.
Egos. There's another one. It's just...
You know, you could spend your life...
We just wanted left alone, didn't we, after all that?
I think the campaign groups of East Anglia, you would see a lot of infighting over essentially nothing. And just people arguing to the death over the use of a word.
You're fighting enough with the authorities. We don't need to fight amongst ourselves. That's
groups and subgroups. You want tobacco in that? Well, no, you probably shouldn't. But
we're all individuals.
If somebody wants to put tobacco in with it, well, that's up to them if they want to do that. I'm not going to write a paper on why they shouldn't do it. Just don't pass it to me, man.
You are literally describing how the cannabis social club scene in the UK collapsed.
Yeah,
exactly the same thing, but it was accelerated by outside agents, by people pouring fuel onto that fire, by people setting other people against each other, by certain people being funded. I mean,
same in the group.
I mean,
still using it, you know.
I can intimate this without then defining.
Asking awkward questions.
And there are certain people that have been around for the whole time of these things that have then been from certain group to certain group. I'm not insinuating. I'm not directly thinking of anybody in particular here, folks. I'm just saying that there happens to be some people that during your era of things and what happened with the LCA, and it's this. Like it's breaking down of it and then sort of moving forward what has happened. There were certain people in different sides, at corporate levels, political levels, grassroots activist levels, that would then cause trouble later on down the line in other areas and whatnot that seemed to be irrational. Like, I like to think that I'm quite an articulate person, and I spent a lot of time when I was first involved with this trying to understand everybody's position and to single it down into a sentence, into paragraphs, to universalize the language so that your fight doesn't exclude me and build your reality on my bones. Like, you know what I mean? And in that, I've met so many people that were logical people that could understand things. They could, like, dress themselves and everything, but they could not get past certain things, no matter how much I spent hours and hours, days, sending them resources, sending them other things, going to dictionary definitions of words and talking about like colloquial use, legalese use, do you know what I mean? And people that just were predestined in their own consciousness to not accept this thing. And so I, again, little tinfoil hat on, think some of the just paid opposition. People that are then put there to go, no, you do this for a bit, you'll get this. And then we saw it with certain people would end up in certain companies, certain institutions got started, and you just saw this synergy. If you wait a minute, you guys are all just in the field with us barefoot pretending to be the thing, and it turns out you're aristocracy and and it just, there's so much of a mess that has happened there that betrays, I guess, the main thing that people are starting to see what the war on drugs always was, which was class control. It's always been a classist endeavor. It was just basically, it was never imposed on the upper classes. Same with alcohol. We saw this alcohol prohibition in the States. You know, when you think Al Capone, a lot of the big boys, they still had their alcohol. They weren't punished. Do you know what I mean? Companies like Bacardi and that, they still existed prior, during, and after. And then a lot of those companies got some quite strong positions in the United States because of the work that they were doing to supply the elites when they weren't allowed alcohol. The same is true of drugs. I mean, we're going to live in a time if they can secure cannabis as they want, medical cocaine. It's already starting to be talked about. You're already starting to get trials potentially coming up in Bern in Switzerland. You've already got supplies. You've got Bolivia and Colombia both approaching the United Nations and talking about could we...
Organic or ethically sourced.
100%. We can either... Cause, no, but it's true. Bolivia did a report and basically found that I think they would save somewhere in the region of $500 million a year if they just went to the cartels and bought the cocaine. They literally just go to them and go, all right, well, you want him in here, we'll buy the cocaine and just sat on it. Solve all the problems. The cocaine wouldn't be out there. The cartels would have made their money. There'd be less violence and whatever. It just, and then so they approached him and if we did this, we would have all these kilos of cocaine. Could we potentially explore a market in Europe, in Asia, It's
a future in dentistry, mate.
We went through this, so we started with cocaine, then we ended up in lidocaine, and we've had to change all of the different canes and variants through the chemistry, mainly because the dentists get addicted. People like drugs. It's a big surprise. You put people around drugs, they're going to go, oh, I wonder what happens if I take that drug.
Yeah. It's the same when you look at children when they're really little, they'll spin the cell round until they're off their head.
I literally made this point last week with the guys from California.
Just a natural way for humans to behave. And people who don't do that are in the minority. It is our human instinct to do these things.
Yeah, and it's not saying everybody should take drugs. I'm not like everybody has to take the drugs. But I'm just saying, if your inability to understand somebody's position on something doesn't mean they shouldn't be able to do it.
Yes,
there's many things I don't get about the world, but I would never say to another human, another adult, you can't do that. Who the fuck am I? Who is anybody? You know what I mean? We need to get beyond that thing. If we live in this paradox of being told we're the freest culture that's ever been, we're the most liberal, the most able to do what we want. But really, go outside and try and do what you want.
If you haven't got a lot of money, if you've got a lot of money, you can probably do what you want.
Well, this is the Silicon Valley approach of late, which has been the kind of move fast and break things. You know, the last thing I saw was Al Pacino. I think he said it in a movie. I think don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. Do you know what I mean? That's the reality of this. That's what I'm alluding that GW did. That retrospectively, they broke the law and they got a retrospective license to cover their asses. That they decided, no, we will be that company in the future and we will do all these things. So we can justify, the ends justify the means. And then by the time anybody knows about it, we're lawful, we're protected. You can't. That was years ago. You can't do us for that.
Bend the law, yeah. It's all right for them to bend the law, but not for you and me.
100%. And that's why the law is being massaged into this system. I suppose then the last sort of point I wanted to ask you about is both then forced into prescriptions. What do you think of the current system? Do you think it's getting any better? Obviously, it's a hell of a lot cheaper than it was when you first entered the market.
It's difficult, to say the least, isn't it?
Hands down, I would way first choice, grow my own. Absolutely, my first choice. That's not for everybody, but my first choice would be to grow my own when I want, how I want, safely. And the only outside interest from any agency would be, is it safe? And I don't mean safe the product, I mean safe as in the installation.
Fire and things like that.
A safe installation, off you go. Same as somebody getting checked for a gun cabinet or something. Yeah, I've had a look, yeah, that's safe. Thanks, see you later.
Seems
not
simple,
everybody can do that. I would rather have somebody produced than to have to go down the route of asking permission for somebody to have a 15-minute conversation with a doctor or a healthcare professional who's only there because they're probably on 50 quid an hour and they probably see 3 patients in the hour or something. It's a rubber stamp exercise. You already explored that before. It's a rubber stamp exercise. You've got your piece of paper, it's stamped, off you go, buy the product from there.
Yeah.
The fact that you are then given a prescription for a certain strain and probably told that you have to have another consultation to have a second strain added onto it just makes me go, you are. What planet are you on? And then you go to the supplying clinic, the supplier pharmacy, and you click on a web link on their page, and hey presto, there's probably 40 strains there, or 40 strains and a load of oil and products and pastels and all these other products, vapes, etc. That you would then have to go back to your healthcare professional or paid practitioner and get another prescription or another 50 quid for another product. That's ridiculous. A flower, a cannabis flower is a cannabis flower.
When we were doing the chocolate, people used to say, what's the best weed? Where's the best weed? We always said the best weed is the one you grow yourself. Simple. It's as simple as that. But we also worked out.
I agree with that sorry more.
That not everybody's in a position to be able to grow. A lot of people are so disabled that they couldn't possibly grow. So they would have. There's always something that, you've got to think about all the different angles. The chocolate came about because not everybody smoked.
And why would you advise somebody to smoke something, really?
Yeah, if that is, it's
not the best advice.
Yeah, if it comes from a cultural thing, then if you already do it, it's a different thing, like you said. But then getting new people into that, just offering them the options. If that's what they land on, that's what they land on.
No criticism.
Somebody could grow for you.
But yeah, I'm not a massive flag waver of what's happening with the medical.
But it's still, again, it's early days. And
compared to what it was like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, say 6 years, is it? Huge difference. Yeah. I mean, literally, we were busted with a grow room, and by the time it got to court, you could go to a clinic and be prescribed. I mean,
next mockery,
we were literally on that jump over that fence, and for Lezley to get prescribed and then continue a prosecution would have been absolute stupidity.
Well, it would have undone what they were trying to do by creating and launching that system. So yeah, it would have been very against their interests. I mean, this is something that I've, from a brief look at Germany, I'm trying to get a German guest on at the minute. Well, not in the coming weeks, because I did an investigation I still write for Weed World. That's a good thing. We've something we have shared in common over the years. And I produced an article about what's going to happen with like the political chaos and the collapse of the coalition. And in that, it talk about the big winner. Because they changed the cannabis law to legalize cannabis, but created such a bastardized, watered-down version that no one could really benefit, the way to get them best access was to get a prescription. But what they did by changing the law was remove cannabis from their, I can't remember, it's a long German word, but their drugs legislation, so that prescribing it became even easier. So the limitation we have in this country, they say the reason you have to keep going back to your prescriber is only the prescriber is allowed to authorize you for each product. Whereas what they're trying to get us to is the old American system, say California, 1997, Santa Monica Beach, doctor in his sandals, you go in and he goes, how do you sleep? How's your back? Leading questions until you say, I'll give you cannabis, because 100 quid, you can go next door and buy whatever you want. They want the doctor to be the point of authorization to make it the Schedule 2, and then as long as the doctor's magic paper is with you, you can then buy and shop what you like on the other side of it, because then there's no limit on the amount of money and profit that they can make. The problem is at the minute that the system is so led by the doctors in the medical sector. That's why they're trying to lobby at the minute, and have been for the past couple of years, to get GP prescribers, because if it's then not specialist practitioners, suddenly you can go to the fucking GP. And then with the integration of, we've got Palantir, a Peter Thiel company, again, the whole of the thing, but terrifying motherfucker, dangerous man, was one of the co-founders of PayPal with Elon Musk, very rich, influential, libertarian, crazy fucker. He's got the contract as his company Palantir for all of the NHS data and to digitize that and to create the new AI data set moving forward. And I think what's going to happen is basically they're going to, like we were saying before, rob the data. So his systems are going to be used so that I think what will happen is effectively you'll just get an NHS app, NHS thing, and you can request and buy cannabis like you do from like the weed delivery services that are unlawful in the UK. You know what I mean? You can just go onto a website, you click down the thing. I think there'll be an assumption of what they're calling in Germany the e-ticket, which basically means that you don't technically need a doctor. I think it's somebody who's in authorization of controlling and selling the drug. So they're trying to almost cut out the doctor, but say it's still in the medical sector. So basically all you have to do is have the app, are you registered to our service? Then yes, that is assumed to be your prescription, your authorization to control cannabis, to have cannabis. And I think that's where we're going towards, because this is what I think is they want to push everybody of going, well, download the app if you got the thing. And it'll basically be, you've got to keep giving us that data through these digital services, how much you use, when you use it, where you buy it, how much, so that then builds this portfolio to create these designer cannabinoid-based drugs that are synthetic, semi-synthetic, fully synthetic, highly profitable and patentable, and then they can just go, well, the plant's useless anymore, we don't need the plant, we've got every drug, we've got 35, 50 CBPMs, so nobody's allowed the flower anymore. That's considered a dangerous drug, like opium. Like you wouldn't be allowed opium, but as long as you got the paper, you're allowed the opioids. You get me? And I feel like I've been saying it since the whole time I've been in here, and people call me a lunatic. But the more time that progresses, and the more I learn, and the more people I speak to, the more correct I feel. And speaking to you guys today, I can't help but feel they've been doing this for a time. That when they first approached you with sort of what became of the GW Connect, that they were always looking at you not as compassionate humans, going, these people are suffering. They were going, how can we placate these people? We're going, oh, we're so sorry this happened to you. If you work with us and give us your information, if you give us everything you know and all of your contacts, we'll make your life better.
Nobody's ever paid us a penny for anything.
They can't. They would see it as being uncouth. It's wrong to do that. You should benefit from it. They can become multimillionaires. That's allowed. But to exploit you people by giving you money?
We did at one point think we were becoming, I don't know, accepted when we were getting, the police would talk to us, like human beings, and doctors would talk to us like human beings. Specialists would ask our opinions, and we were asked to speak at conferences, medical conferences. We thought we were being taken seriously and being asked to help them make this work, but we weren't. We were being exploited, exactly like you said, and the piss taken. But we did at one point think we were being taken in and listened to. But I
empathise with that. I've been there. Like literally, I was on the Victoria Derbyshire show. BBC took me down to go talk about like LSD. Did a whole thing. Yeah, it's like, and you get caught up in the people are kind of thinking about that
seriously.
But then they control the conversation and the narrative. They manufacture your consent into that space for you to act as a prop for their narrative, rather than you getting a platform to speak your narrative.
Yes, and
the first time they did that to me, I went, oh, okay, you ain't doing this fucking thing again. And I see it with so many people. As soon as you start to get success and momentum, they go, come on our show, come on our thing. We'll give you the attention, and then they trick you into it over conversation, subtle inputs of things where then you feel obligated and obliged to say it in a certain way, to use a certain phrase, to say medical cannabis rather than cannabis. Do you know what I mean? To say X, Y, Z.
And you end up alienating people, like you said before,
perpetuating their narrative. Yeah.
Esther Ranson show, they sat us next door to a mother of a daughter who died of a heroin overdose, and we were there to talk about medical cannabis. And it's like, whoa, that was loaded.
Well, we were all introduced to Esther Ranson at the beginning of the show and made to shake hands with her like she was the queen. Nice. It was really weird.
She made me leave this here now.
Really weird.
But it's, again, what shows you is, from having those experiences, the world they project, the media-driven little digital space that we all live in, and the reality behind it, the man behind the curtain. I mean, I sat talking to fucking Emily Thornberry with is she defence minister or some shit at the minute? When I was sat in the Victoria Derbyshire show, and we ended up having a very interesting conversation. First, she ignored me until they have the screen on, and then they have the VTs like loading up, saying what you're on for. And then she kind of perked up, but when we started having a conversation about her friend who suffers from depression and was interested if LSD and psilocybin would help with, chronic in sort of intractable depression. And she picked my ear quite heavily. And then after the fact, sort of when I messaged her after, it's like, it didn't fucking exist. That conversation never happened. You can't put that in a Twitter message. What the, do you know what I mean? It's like never, and it's like, no, that happened. You can't gaslight me. I remember pretty well most fucking things. That happened.
The time we met Priti Patel when she was a student.
And she was smoking weed.
Didn't happen, man.
I was going to say, do we have to put an allegedly? I'm going to put an allegedly there just for my own platform, because there are some people in the public sphere that are very capricious with their legislative actions, litigious actions, sorry. Ooh, it's, again, somebody like Liz Truss, who started in sort of a certain space of student activism and then liberal Democrats, and then ended up going into being what she becomes. You can see the malleability of these people versus the others that are like, no, I'm like yourself, you committed to a thing, so your life is, the continuity is there. There isn't all these events that suddenly you change massively who you are as a person. You grow and evolve and become better, like a seed grows into the tree, but you don't suddenly become a different fucking tree every 3 years. No. Like, did you know what I mean? So you see the difference between I don't want to say this because I believe everybody is a beautiful, wonderful creature. I don't believe there are evil people. I believe there are evil acts. I believe that people can be created to do, or made to do atrocious fucking things. But I don't think that it is in them to do that. There is no baby born that then decides to become, I don't know, Ted Bundy. The CIA and American society had a lot to do with that. No, sorry, Ted Bundy, Ted Kaczynski. Sorry, two very different Teds in American pop culture there. But yeah, and I think that the war on drugs and everything that we're seeing, like I said, through the medicinalization, through the continued war, is an attempt to figure out, sieve through the people. It's to sift through and to figure out, like I said, the control, because as long as they are in control and you kowtow down to them, when they say bow, you bow, they don't give a shit. They don't care. They are the naked emperor, and how dare you point out he has no fucking clothes on? That's literally where we're at. You can't point out, you can't challenge the status quo, and that which challenges the status quo is the controlled opposition. It's the blue versus reds, it's the left versus the right, it's the there. It's these manufactured performances of activism, these manufactured performances of politics, of meaningful discourse in the populace. Just goes, that's taken care of. I'm going to go watch this fishing video. No offense to anyone watch fishing videos. The things that the phone has got us lost in, the things that we've got lost in our lives when there's injustice around every corner. There is something horrible happening on every street.
Staring into 24/7.
Yeah, and I just want the third space back. Pubs are closing at 20 odd a fucking month. Nightclubs are disappearing. They'll be gone by 2030. At the current closure rate, all music venues are gone by 2028. They don't want us outdoors with each other's. What do you want when you want a joint? You roll it, you smoke it, you pass that shit. You want to be together with each other. We need to create that space. And I think, like we're proving, we need now a new movement of just, nah, fuck it. I mean, that's kind of what I'm doing with Durham and our events. We've just gone, nah, fuck it. I've told the police what we're doing. The police have gone, okay. And we've done it. And then we're coming back this year in March and we're going to do it again. We're going to sell cannabis to adults. We're going to consume cannabis openly. We're going to show that we are not a threat to the fucking society. We're going to challenge that paradigm and create that discretion so that the next generation of me doesn't have to get caught up in that. So that your grandchildren don't have to see their grandparents fucking having their doors taken off. They don't have to see the threat of this. Like, it's an absurdity. Like, you think... It fucks my head up to think, like, I started smoking weed when I was like 12, 13 and really got into it about 14, 15. It was like, that's my shit. And all at that time, just over half my life, I've been scared of that blue light. I've been scared of that siren. I've been mindful of how I smell. I've had to be worried about who I'm with and who knows what about me and who knows where I live and what I do and who I associate with.
Absolutely.
Why should your entire life suppressed?
I think you're just got to take the leaf out of Chris Baldwin and Winston Matthews' book and say, don't plead guilty, man.
100. I think that's the way to truly challenge.
Don't press their souls a peril.
I let them know we're not going to let them stamp on us anymore. I can't.
Never seen two activists behave in the way that those two guys did. Chris would walk around with a piece tied around his neck so he could be insured. And something I did from then, I was always carry a bud with you. But, I mean, he had a bud tied around his neck, so he couldn't not be in possession. So any time he was stopped by the police, he would be busted.
It's the person behind like the bling your bud ones. He's dipped in gold, and I love these pieces because again, it's that this is an art form. And I don't know whether Bob and that meant it, but it's a cannabis nug dipped in gold. And so the way they would prosecute me is they would have to test the cannabis, but because it's covered in gold, they can't test it. So therefore, the statement in that is money protects you from prosecution.
Oh.
Do you know? I don't know whether they intended that, but it's fucking amazing. It's the money protects the drug. They can't prosecute the drug because they can't break the thing. Obviously, it's broken down the cannabis. There isn't cannabinoids in there, but it's the conceptual idea of this thing that is unlawful. I am proudly displaying. I'm not a blinged person or anything like that, but I do proudly display it. And because again, it is that statement of. I mean, you're in possession, whether you're in possession of the product or whether it's in your body anyway, because even if you don't consume cannabis, you are running on endocannabinoids. You have, when you breastfeed a child, it's anandamide. The first fucking thing your child gives from a parent is cannabis. It's mental. It's the whole paradigm of all of this. I mean, and the truth is known in certain circles, but now, I mean, this relates to one of the upcoming podcasts I'll be doing with Kevin Jones again. He's currently in a war with the BBC, trying to figure out why the mainstream media supported people like yourselves and championed these stories and had these debates and these lively investigations. There were late night talk show hosts, morning TV, all the rest of it. And then 2018 happens and boom, gone. Nobody's allowed to talk about anything anymore. There's only ever the corporate paid pieces that are saying that this company good. There's then all the advertising for all of the clinics and services that just keep
advertising on TV.
Or there's the gangs, county lines, foreign national grows cannabis in our country stories. Do you know what I mean?
That trick.
Yeah, there's no narrative. There's nobody exploring that. No one's allowed to produce any content that puts that in a pile, looks at it objectively, and goes, "The fuck." It's just not allowed. So we're seeing the attitude of the average person because of the way that we're indoctrinated in our little screens. You read those stories, and if you just see enough of it over time, drip by drip, you believe that dangerous street cannabis that those Thai nationals are growing in that house compared to this lovely, beautiful, imported, probably from Thailand, cannabis that's a medical product for these people. Do you know what I mean? That it creates and fortifies this what do you call it, cognitive dissonance. So that the average person will vehemently go, yes, punish my neighbour for growing that plant, but that child needs cannabis, so they should have it subsidised on the NHS. You're right, yeah, if it helps him, it keeps that child alive, it's a wonderful thing, but only when it comes from the magic people. But my neighbour, who I used to think was a good person, and then I saw them with one of those marijuanas. Like, it's literally, that's the attitude. I've seen it, I've lived it, I still fucking live it. It blows my fucking mind, it breaks my heart. It almost makes me want to fucking cry. Like, it's so just how we can build this tower, this endless monolith of the medical cannabis industrial complex. But then when you ask a simple question, they would just pop it and poof. But they can't. You're not allowed. Your platform is removed. You're censored. Or you're just trying to ruin the party. Why are you trying to get? No, just come and be one of us. You're fine. You don't need to grow your own. I'll just lie. Just don't tell people you grow your own.
No harm in some profit.
Yeah, or if you grow a little bit extra. There's the justifications of it. I mean, I always come back to South Park and The Simpsons on this podcast for some reason, but there's an episode of Crack Baby Basketball. It's as horrible as it sounds, but it's used as an analogy to explore the exploitation of student athletes in American college, college basketball and sports, and how they don't get paid and there's a whole thing, but basically there's a point in that where Kyle, usually the voice of reason in South Park, and Cartman, the fucking arse of it, Kyle starts justifying because he starts making money from their endeavour. And there's then Kyle's talking to Stan, who represents like the everyman, as it were, and Stan goes, "You're starting to sound like Cartman." And that's exactly what is happening. So many of the voices and people that were like, no, all of us should be free, once they got free, were like, wait, my freedom is dependent on not letting them be free. Okay, I'm free. Do you know what I mean? It's so many people have pulled the ladder up. So many people are betraying others every time they say the words medical cannabis. You are betraying cannabis. You are creating a false binary in the minds of the uninitiated. If there is medical cannabis, there must be cannabis, and cannabis can't be medical because it would be medical cannabis. It's all an indoctrination. It's all a trick. It's self-censorship. It's self-indoctrination, inculcation into, like I said, just subservience. We've told you that plant that's exactly the same isn't the same. Repeat it. It's medical and it's rec. Mine's rec and it's not medical. I'm sorry. I'll go to prison. Thank you. Literally, that's all they want is control, no matter what it looks like, no matter what society looks like. They'll let it burn, clearly. They'll let it fucking flood. They'll let half the world not eat and half the world not fucking be able to access clean water. As long as they keep making money and you say, yes, sir, you know, this is ice cream, this is ice cream.
I think the funniest one was when I seen Philip Schofield advertising gummies, CBD gummies on the television, and I thought, oh my God, that must be all right now because Philip Schofield said it.
But the loopholes they get to, no, that's not cannabis. We derived that from hemp. Hemp isn't cannabis.
Yeah,
and you're like, what the fuck is wrong with you people? And I'm still unpinning that lie and trying to get people to stop saying hemp or to caveat it and to say at least like cannabis hemp or something that creates then a proper noun and a different definition, because otherwise we fall down to the colloquial definition or the legalese definition. And hemp doesn't exist under the law, folks. You get I'm a hemp farmer. No, you're not. Look at your fucking license. Low THC cannabis cultivation license. Hemp doesn't appear on there because it's not allowed to, because in legalese it doesn't exist, because it's an old English word that isn't used anymore. The word we use is cannabis. It's just manipulations and just bullshit. And now they're doing it with the FDA saying that, purely synthetically derived CBD from things like orange peel and shit like that, or yeast mold extracts, fermentation extracts, are pure CBD. But CBD extracted from cannabis botanicals grown naturally with love and all the joy and all the wonderful things we've been talking about. That's not pure. That's an isolated product. You've isolated that, and that isolate doesn't. Like I said, it's not just the language they get us to talk to ourselves in. It's the language they write the laws in, so that when they put you in the courtroom and you're scared, and they've done that, everything about that, from their uniforms, their language, their maneuvers, everything about your interaction with the police is controlled, is over a century being honed in for you to feel, I'm safe, it's okay, it's fine, and you give and then boom, and you're done. Like, they are not your friends, folks. Again, PSA here, police are not your fucking friends. They will talk to you real nice. And I say this as someone who works quite well with Durham police, but under the emphasis that they are not my fucking friends.
Absolutely.
We have that mutual respect in my point of contact, in that he knows I kind of despise him because I've said as much. I can't help it. I don't despise him personally. I despise the fact that he chooses, while informed, to stay in that uniform. There's one thing being grown up with Paw Patrol and being given a police car and you're, good guys, bad guys, and watching TV and only being in a certain world and thinking you're a good person. But once you become informed and you choose continually to do that, I'm sorry, that makes you a bad person, or at least acting in bad faith with the humans, you know what I mean? And yeah, it's the shit system we're under. I think I'm grateful eternally for the work that you guys have done, for the precedents that you have set, and for the fact that you are willing to talk about this publicly. Do you know what I mean? So few people.
It's been a while since we have.
Yeah.
Well, I very much hope this doesn't cause any trouble.
No.
I think the last time we probably spoke was at one of the Durham meets.
Was it been? I'm trying to find it there. The poster, the Autumn Expo.
Yeah, well, we weren't found guilty. We were not guilty then. I think we were on bail.
It'll have been, when was it? It was October 2018. So yeah, it'll be just
bail. And we haven't done anything other than a couple of local articles after that case, and then we just sort of do what you do.
Quietly slink away.
When something happens, maybe just say what you think every now and then. And more recently, every now and then you're reminded of your mortality. The passing of Winston recently, I think it's his funeral tomorrow, possibly the 14th. Possibly, I might think that's right. So yeah, a lot of time for that guy, an awful lot of time for him.
It's a dime.
It was a huge miss.
True original.
Yeah. A lot of respect. He's always had a lot of time for me, always been an avid supporter of sort of whatever I did, and he was always very understanding of my anger. When I first got in this, I was fucking angry. I'm still angry, but I'm a lot more controlled in recognizing I'm not going to just burn all my fuel in one go. I've got a lifetime. I'm mid-30s. I'm hoping to still not have to be fighting this in my 70s, but I'm hoping to live to my 70s, and I'm willing to put what I've got towards it.
We didn't still think we'd be fine in our 60s. I seriously didn't expect to have to go back to court again. It's just getting ridiculous.
Yeah.
Let's leave it there, right?
They don't ever come back.
I sincerely hope they never come back. I'd like to preliminarily sort of invite you guys. We will be doing another kind of big event. I'm not going to say who I'm working with, but I'm working with somebody else up here on the idea of doing another big sort of expo. I want another event where we bring all sides together and, again, just show we can sell weed, we can smoke. Everything we did at Durham at that event where I just went, here's my vision of the future. Come enjoy for a few hours and get to talk to the people. I think the more we can have those kind of gatherings, we can recognize the lowest common denominator, our humanity, that I always use the analogy of like a train, that it stops along the line. I'm riding to the end. I'm going to sit on the train and make sure it goes to the fucking end so that we're done. There are some people that are stop 1, stop 2, stop 3, and I respect that. I'm going to help you lay the tracks so you can get off at your stop. But if you try and stop the fucking train at your station, we're going to have problems. Do you know what I mean? And that's what has been happening, is that I'm spent the past few years just trying to find who are the lifers, who are the people that, regardless of our friendship, our camaraderie, our connection as individuals, I can rely on to know that in 5 years they'll be here. That touch wood, as long as mortality aside, you know what I mean, that if they can be, they will fucking be here. And I think that's part of what I'm trying to do with the podcast. Like I said, is have these voices, have these stories and these narratives brought together so that the audience can learn, so that the me as a teenager can hopefully absorb some of this information. And if I end up being in my 60s at this point, unfortunately, I imagine probably after yourselves had gone, and I'm facing my own end of sort of life, that then they're looking down that barrel, that they would then hopefully be able to correlate all of the stories that have come since and keep passing it down. Because I feel like that's all we're doing, is those lifers are the ones that are not trying to be, oh no, I'm God, I invented the cannabis industry, put me in the history books, it stops now, do you know what I mean, that kind of person. There's the others that recognize it's that'll probably like plant date trees or plant the trees that you will never see the shade of. You know what I mean? And we need to recognize each other, find, conglomerate together. We have wealth, resources, like I said, you've experienced it, the kindness of people, the generosity of people, the potential of the masses collectivizing towards a common ideal or goal is powerful. And I think we just need to find a new filter to get rid of the dickheads, just get rid of the money men, get rid of the medical only, the hemp only, the people incapable of understanding that your profit shouldn't be based on the limitations of another human.
Absolutely.
All right. It's been a pleasure, guys. It has been a pleasure.
Sweet.
Taking the time.
Catch up in human form soon, I hope.
Indeed, that's what I think I half invited you to there, saying, we're going to be putting together another event, so I'll be in touch.
Nice one. Thank
Have a great
you.
day.
Have a good day. Take care.
Give us a shout.
Peace and love. Well, there you go, folks. That was Mark and Lezley Gibson. I hope you enjoyed that. I know I certainly did. We've ran a little bit longer than I sort of intended to. But yeah, I felt in good health today and was very sort of chatty. I'm quite a loquacious person anyway, but given the opportunity to speak to some people who are and have been so intimately involved in sort of the UK cannabis space for many decades, was really of interest to me, and I hope it was to yourselves. I think it really helped to illuminate some things on our sort of chronology, on our timeline of sort of events over the past 30 years here in the UK. and it's slowly giving us a bit more of an idea of kind of how we got into this point of conflicting schedulings, contradictory legislation, the corruption of politics. Well, politicians are always going to be corrupt, so that's not really a mystery, is it? But yeah, how we've ended up with sort of the system and the practices that we've got currently, and yeah, hopefully informing ourselves that we can make changes and progress the system so that, yeah, this generation of activists are not into what should be enjoying their retirement and still having the fear and the worry that their lives could be ruined for a plant. It's an absurdity. It's ever more an absurdity when quite literally billions are being made within the medical cannabis industrial complex. Potentially, maybe not billions in this country yet, but believe me, that's what they're working on. All right, yeah. If you enjoyed this, please do give us a like, a share, a subscribe, a thumbs up, a heart, or whatever it is on whatever platform that you enjoy this podcast on. Really appreciate it and appreciate you. So thank you. If you really enjoyed this, do check us out on patreon.com/a Simpa Life, where for less than a cup of coffee a week, you can help me keep the lights on this little project of mine. Yeah, check out simpalife.com for further content. Check out Weed World magazine. I've just finished quite an interesting piece discussing sort of the political chaos and turmoil in German politics and the collapse of the coalition and how that could impact sort of legalization moving forward, how that potentially will impact the German medical cannabis industrial complex, its industry. So yeah, interesting, worth your time, I would say. All right, I'm gonna get off, and yeah, I hope you enjoy your day. Hope you have a wonderful week. Hope you get up to something beautiful. Hope you share something amazing with somebody you love, and that, yeah, life is generally good to you. I know this time of year can be a bit sucky. I know we've just, I think, passed Blue Monday, is that what you call it? So yeah, I hope you're doing well. The days are getting brighter. It is getting warmer. It is getting lighter. Yeah, there's reasons to be optimistic. There's many, many, many reasons to be optimistic and hopeful. All right, I'm still waffling on. I'm going to let you go, and we'll be back next week with, I don't know, somebody. You'll love it. It'll be awesome. All right, peace and love, folks.